All right. The board meeting of the Board of Education for June 23rd, 2020 is called to order. For tonight's meeting, any item that will be voted on has been posted as required by state law. This meeting is being streamed live on Channel 28 and will be replayed throughout the next 2 weeks. Please check the district website for replay times. This meeting is also being streamed live on our PPS TV services website. Good evening. Hello to our viewing audience. Today marks the last board meeting of our 2019-2020 school year, which, to say the least, has been a year of unexpected great challenges. Tonight's agenda includes adoption of our budget for 2020-2021, a vote on our superintendent's evaluation, and also an update on school entry plans for the fall. We will also say goodbye to Student Representative Latterell before she heads off for her freshman year at the University of Michigan, and also meet Nathaniel Shue, who is our incoming student representative. How are you, Max?
I'm good. I'm good. It's summer now. I'm happy about that. Not really having the hot weather, but it's exciting to finish this year.
All right. Well, we are looking forward to hearing your final report. We'll move on to the business agenda. At this time, we will consider our business agenda. Board members, are there any items anyone would like to pull for discussion?
I've got a couple questions about some contracts.
Okay, shall we, Ms. Bradshaw, are there any changes to the business agenda?
No.
All right, let's get the motion on the table, and Director Brim Edwardson, you can bring your questions forward. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Director Scott moves and Director Brim Edwards seconds the adoption of the business agenda. Any discussion?
Yes. I have some questions about the Office of the General Counsel Network, a contract in tonight's agenda. I have some questions about some of the other contracts, but I understand that Director Lowry also is going to join me in questions tonight. So I'll ask some questions and then flip it over to her. So I'm going to just start off. And these are questions for Executive Chief of Staff, Stephanie. I just saw her waving, but she moved on the screen. Executive Chief of Staff, Stephanie Soden, who provided an overview memo for the board. And as has been past practice, that memo was posted with the meeting materials. And so I want to say thank you for the background material. So I just had a couple questions about the contract, just because it's a direct negotiation contract. So the first one is, we've had previous contracts. Is this a new contract or an amendment?
This is a new contract.
Okay. And then given this is a new contract, I want to confirm that this contract also requires, as did the last one, that if other attorneys are hired by Ms. Large, that it will be with prior approval of PPS as indicated in Exhibit A and Exhibit B.
Yes, it explicitly says that PPS's approval is included.
Okay, so that's a carryover from the other contract.
It's similar way we have been acting before.
Great. And then I want to clarify that the contract provides, specifically provides for general counsel, because it's just somewhat a different model than other school districts, that the contract provides for general counsel services from Ms. Large, and then conflict resolution services specifically from another attorney with OGCN, as well as access to a network of other legal and non-legal professionals, that it's not just a sole individual contract, it's actually several individuals and potentially a network if we wanted to access that.
Yes, that's correct.
Okay. And then again, because this is just a slightly different model, I know the district has looked at the cost efficacy of this model versus just a standard in-house, and then using a lot of outside counsel. So I'm just wondering if you could speak to that, the sort of the district's review of the cost efficacy of this.
Absolutely. So that's always, a key element. And when we're looking and putting together contracts and asking for approval, if you see the rates listed in this contract, they are significantly lower than the cost of employing a general counsel and team and paying all of those overhead costs. It's also, we get a really good deal with this contractor. She and her team have been very diligent in finding ways to reduce costs for the district. And if you compare it to other firms in town, these rates are very, very comparable. Actually, very, very cost effective for the district.
I was gonna say, maybe
Yeah.
better than competitive.
Yes, thank you.
Yeah, so my last question, and this is just generally more of a district-wide question, because I think sometimes it's the thought is that only the Office of the General Counsel is, actively hiring attorneys. And I just want to, because I know we have a variety of different issues happening in the district where we might hire either attorneys or other professionals to review information or to do investigations. And so I just wanted to clarify that you and other staff from time to time might hire an outside attorney to conduct an investigation or to do something, say, for example, related to a complaint, or to do other work that maybe drafting a document that wouldn't necessarily be the Office of General Counsel services.
Correct. Yes, we enter into other contracts with other attorneys outside of this contract.
Okay, that's all the questions I had about that contract. I think Director Lowry had some.
Yes, I did have a question for Ms. Sodenbeck. You, in your memo, highlighted all of the great reasons to do this, and I just wondered, because this is a different arrangement than some other districts have, do you see any downsides to our arrangement with the Office of the Counsel General?
General Counsel.
Yeah, thanks.
I do not see any downsides. I think districts choose a variety of different models for their legal services. Some have in-house, like I described, and others use contract, and then there's a mix. And so I think we've gotten incredible amount of service and attention to really focusing on honing in and limiting our legal costs since we've used this contractor. So I think it's just been a really positive experience, and I appreciate that we have a chance to revisit the contract from time to time and reflect and decide how we want to move forward.
Great. And then I did have one other question about one other contract, Director Brim Edwards, if you were ready to move on.
Go ahead. I'm happy to have company.
So Dan, I saw the memo about our cab services, and I thought it's very clearly laid out the reasons that, and it was staggering to see that we've gone from, I can't remember the exact numbers, but from something in the low tens to over 250 students over the course of 5 years that are needing specialized services. And so at the end of the memo, it says that the hope is we will be able to incorporate more small bus routes and maybe step away from cabs in the future. And I was wondering what, if any, steps that the Transportation Department is putting into place to begin to realize that hope.
Yeah, good evening, and great question. I'll give a high-level answer, and then I'll see if our Director of Student Transportation is on the call as well, Terry Brady. She might have some more specifics. Cab costs is something very specifically that we have targeted for taking a hard look at and looking to reduce the next fiscal year. So what we have started already is meeting with our special ed departments, where much of the cab costs end up coming from, meeting with them already to start talking about next year. And what we've put in place is a sequence where we're going to sit down with them probably on a monthly basis, take a look at which students are on the cabs and see if there are opportunities for students to come off of cabs, go on to the smaller transportation or yellow buses, adding aids potentially to some of the smaller buses or vehicles, or something like that where there is some cost savings. We'll have to wait and see how much of that is available, but what we do see with those cab prices is they start off at an amount beginning of the year, and they slowly or they increase throughout the year. So if we can take the time to be intentional about looking at every one of those, and we can see that plateau or come down, that's something that we would like to do. So that's sort of the high level what we're doing from a process standpoint, and I'll let Terry Brady add anything if I miss something.
Good evening. This is Terry Brady, Director of Student Transportation, Portland Public Schools. Thank you for allowing me to talk today. Dan's correct. Some of the other things that we're looking at, we've been fighting the Cdl driver shortage for several years. We've had recent increases in the driver wages. That has helped us in order to recruit more drivers. We were just starting to realize some of those gains when we had our emergency closure this year, but we do hope to continue that. So having more yellow bus drivers means pushing less towards our cabs. We do plan on meeting monthly with SPED to discuss how many students are being placed in the out of district, what students are being moved to a cab due to behavior issues. We hope to increase our student management training to really try and address the specific behaviors we're seeing. We've had a large increase, and SPED can also attest to this, that our highest growth, I believe, is with our behavior students and our autistic students who, you know, they need a specific type of behavior management in order to keep them safe and still relatively on the bus. So those are some of the things that we're working on to try and reduce that level of dependence on cabs.
Thank you. Does that satisfy your question, Director Lowry? Director Bailey, do you have a question about one of the MOUs on the business agenda tonight? Director Bailey? Okay, we can, I guess, move the business agenda, and if he does.
I'm not done. Sorry.
Okay. Scott?
Maybe while Scott's looking for or waiting for Scott to get back. Actually, I thought there was a good news item in the agenda from the grant from PGE. I don't know if there's somebody who can speak to that.
Hi, Julia. If it's in regards to the electric bus, I can speak to that.
Yes.
What would you like to know?
I don't know. Like, we got a grant from PGE for an electric bus?
Yeah, we applied for a grant early in the year this year. The grant is from PGE, and then we're also in partnership with Pacific Core Power because our lot actually sits in their business area. So the grant allows us to purchase one fully electric bus and to purchase and install the charging infrastructure to go with that bus. It's going to be a 10-year project that will work with them on testing out how electric buses can work in our setting. We were one of 5 districts that received the grant. Salem, Kaiser, Beaverton, North Clackamas, and Reynolds also received grants. Our bus, well, I guess we haven't announced who's our vendor for the bus yet, so I'll keep that. But we are looking at an all-electric bus. We plan on using it on routes that will service our CSI, TSI schools. At this time, it's only one bus, but we hope to keep our green status and move forward with electric into the future. It's just that electric buses cost approximately 4 times the amount of a normal bus. So just a reminder, we do operate the majority of our buses on propane. We're trying to move as far as possible away from diesel. So this electric bus is just one more way we can stay green.
And if I may add, this is Jonathan Garcia, Chief Engagement Officer. Director Bryn Meadows, this is also aligned to PGE's investment to continue the work around environmental sustainability, environmental justice as part of our curriculum. And so we're really excited that PGE, has doubled down not only with our curriculum infrastructure, but now with our built or operational infrastructure. So, because as we know, our young people not only are asking or demanding for curriculum in the classroom, but are also asking institutions like ours to continue to be more green and more sustainable. And so I think this is a huge first step that we're excited that we get to partner with PGE and other school districts.
Great. Well, great job for all staff who put together the application and secured the grant.
I have a quick question for Ms. Brady. You said the buses are 4 times as much and that one day we can hopefully move the entire fleet to electric, which I fully support. Has anybody done the analysis on what the overall maintenance schedule looks like and what that costs? Because I know with energy efficiency improvements, they do tend to cost more upfront, but if you look out, you look for the payoff date, which is 7 to 10 years is a good investment, but even beyond that, what you're looking at in terms of maintenance, long-term maintenance and of the infrastructure. And then the other question, I think I heard you say there was a charging station too. So it sounds like, will there be a battery or a charging station where that'll be parked in the lot?
Yes, so part of this project is to work on that total cost of ownership and see how we could move towards a full electric fleet in the future. We also expect that as this technology becomes more mainstream, the cost will come down. The majority of the cost is within the battery, and so as technology moves forward, it will become less expensive. So there's not much we've done so far on total cost of ownership. There are a lot of studies out there. It's very popular in California and some other states who've been well on the road before us. As far as the charging structure, we will have, we're looking to purchase a charger that has 2 stations, even though we'll only have 1 bus. Part of our grant allowed us, working with Pacific Core, they're actually going to install a new transformer because our lot is right on Marine Drive. So that will help us in the future. We were able to tie it in with a current generator project, so that helped us save on construction costs. We hope to have all of this installed and possibly get delivery of the bus by the end of the school year, although it depends on the manufacturing schedule of the bus company. But yes, we will have 1 charging station. It will be behind our gates, so it won't be public, but it'll be there for us.
I mean, I think we have like the 2nd cheapest electric in the country behind, I think it's a Midwestern state. I can't remember which one, but it might be a cost savings that we can look at over time if it costs more to invest up front, but if our long range operating costs are lower, might be something to look at in the future.
Oh, definitely. Both the electricity is cheaper and the maintenance, there's fewer moving parts. There's you get a better break where do the regenerative braking. So we are excited to make those discoveries.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. And Mr. Garcia, we love to see these kind of partnerships. So yes, please, more of that. Thank you. Now, Director Bailey, do you have a question about one of the MOUs?
Yeah. Can you hear me now?
We can, yes.
Okay, yeah. I plugged in my headphones and that seemed to knock out the audio, so good times. Yes, I had a question about the Jefferson PCC agreement. I learned, I think, from one of our student leaders, who I think is our new board rep, I'm not sure, that Jefferson students are limited to 1 PCC course a term. Is this MOU, or I don't know if it's an MOU or IGA, does this govern that funding for our students, our Jefferson students who are taking PCC courses?
Uh, Director, good evening, board members. Director Bailey, it does, but the information about the limitations, they beginning with the junior year, they're able to participate in the program, and between the junior and senior year, they can take up to 45 credits. It is not suggested that they take more than that because there is an opportunity for dual credit participation, and also they have to meet the requirements for graduation, so there are school credits they have to meet. As far as the limitation on credits per session, that is, I don't know if that might have been a counselor recommendation for that particular student. But generally speaking, there are no limitations. There is a conversation with each student to make sure that they're able to meet the rigorous programming that exists if you're taking if you're part of middle college and then also participating in a dual credit program, but that is not a limitation.
And that is clearly spelled out in this MOU as well, that participating students are expected to earn a high school diploma from Jefferson, as well as 12 to 45 college level credits from PCC. These 12 to 45 college credits are a goal and not a limitation. But Scott, I was with you in that budget session breakout with the students. So that is something that we should follow up on, those comments from that student, and see if whatever the mechanism. Oh, Nathaniel, you're here. And I do believe that was you. So welcome. So nice to see you. And what would you like to add on this question?
Yeah, I just like to say that it wasn't a formal limitation. It was a limitation as a result of insufficient funding. We simply don't have enough. We get a fixed sum, right? And we don't have enough funding to allow for students to take multiple classes, at least not this term. In fact, during this term of the program, we didn't have enough funding for all students to even take one class. There were a few that weren't permitted to, as I understand it. So, yeah.
So that's what I'm talking about.
Okay.
Thank you, Nathaniel. So I think I would, and I would expect the rest of the board would as well be interested in some follow-up information on this.
I'm very interested in follow-up.
Can we ask Dr. Valentino to get back to us on that question? Because if that is the common practice, it is contrary to the MOU that's before us to approve.
I will definitely follow up and report back.
Thank you very much.
Great. Thank you.
If it's in conflict, should we be voting on the MOU without resolving it?
Well, I think we're voting on, we're saying that there are no limitations, which is the language of the MOU. So if there are in fact limitations, then we need to deal with that on the ground. I think the MOU accurately states our expectations and our aspirations.
Was there a dollar amount in that MOU, or did I confuse reading things?
I don't believe so.
Oh,
well, not directly for a specific number of credits. Well,
No, Director
credit courses. There is a line item, tuition for credit courses.
Right. Correct. The total PCC IGA commitment dollar was $460,000, and that included the support for a full-time college advisor, an afternoon coordinator, and staff to extend the hours of the middle college office. And those costs also include like the fringe benefits for that full-time college advisor and operating costs associated with the middle college office. And then tuition, which was around $168,000, was for the tuition for the credit courses, which was part of the agreement. So that's initially was the dollar amount. Director Constam was $460 for the full PCC IGA commitment.
So
So
I guess what we're asking is for a
that-
breakdown of how that tuition number affects, how many students are able to take X number of classes, and if in fact students aren't able to access as many credit-bearing classes as they would like to.
Yes, we'll make sure that the Office of Teaching and Learning absolutely gets the answers to that, and will respond in full to the board and superintendent.
Thanks. Thank you, Nathaniel, for bringing this up originally.
Yeah.
All right, the board will now vote on.
Actually, Amy, I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
I have two more things.
Sorry.
That's okay. So I don't want to let the first student contract go just because it's a $30 million contract. It's actually $176 million overall. But it's a 2-year extension for about $30 million. So I just had a couple questions, especially given as we enter the contracting season and the uncertainty of what the model is that we're going to be operating in, and just making sure that we have flexibility, whether we're in a in-school environment, a distance learning, or some sort of hybrid, that with our vendors, especially ones in which they may or may not be providing services, that we have flexibility. So I had a question. I don't know if this is something that Deputy Superintendent Hertz or Terry Brady is going to answer, but just the question is, in this 2-year extension, have we built in the flexibility for the various models of how we might be operating, whether it's distance learning, in school, a hybrid, or a mix throughout the school year?
So I'm going to ask Chief Operations Officer Dan Young to respond to the first student contract information.
Sorry. Question 3.
No, happy to do it. And then I'll probably do the same thing, let Terry provide some additional detail. So with this amendment, we started negotiating this amendment back in February, and I would say we were 95% there by the end of February. And then when March happened, things changed pretty dramatically. Luckily, we've got to, I think, a very good place, really the best place that we could get with this negotiation. And what it has in there as far as rates is we pay a rate based upon the number of routes that are run. And if there is variability in that, if we drop below a certain number, certainly the rate numbers change as you go up and down, but we also provide a minimum amount of fixed costs. And that's something that was part of the original contract. We've just codified it more in this amendment. So that allows to have some level of certainty that, so if there's a point in time where we need 200 drivers, there's a point in time where we need 100 drivers, they're going to be able to fluctuate, and we're going to be able to fluctuate with that. We wouldn't use the word guarantee, but what that does is that helps mitigate those risks as we go into next year and we see what our transportation services are or needs are. I don't know if that fully answers the question or if you're looking for more specific.
Yeah, no, I think if I were to summarize it, is that this gives them some certainty, but it also provides us some certainty in that we've, sounds like we've reached an agreement on what the fixed costs are. So that if we have, if we go in and out of closures or building closures, that they know what they're going to be, what their fixed base is going to be paid, and we know that as well, correct?
Correct. So we think of it sort of as we have this base, and then as we add on to it more routes, then we know we pay per route.
Okay, I really appreciate the district staff sort of protecting the district in that way of knowing exactly what we're going to be paying. So the other, well, my assumption is, and then whatever that fixed cost, the typical state district cost sharing agreement is an operation, the state would pay 75% of whatever that cost is?
That is correct.
Okay.
Sorry to interrupt, but it's 70%.
Oh,
70%, sorry.
It's okay.
So I was trying to get an extra 5%. So I think that, just my last question is, I'd asked staff to do like, just, this is something that came out of the audit of like looking sort of at peer districts in comparison of the cost per mile, just given us such a large contract, the cost per mile or some sort of benchmark against another district. And the benchmark that PPS provided was with Hillsborough, and I don't know if you want to share what that was, but I thought we came out a comparative just a little bit less per mile than Hillsborough.
Yeah, that's one that we looked at, and yeah, we were pretty close on that. And that's a pretty quick look as well. Certainly, there's different transportation models between what's contracted and what's done in house. And we participate in KPIs with the Council of Great City Schools as well, so we get that national look. But again, there is a challenge to apples. But yeah, in that one that we pulled, we were very comparative.
So heading into this next year, we won't have a situation like last year where we're having to negotiate some sort of agreement. We've got something that has the flexibility in a COVID environment that protects the district.
That is correct. Over the month of March this year, the contract language just said to negotiate what those fixed costs were. So we did that in March. Now what we've done is we've codified it in this amendment. So if we come to that scenario, it won't take time to come to that number.
Great. And then my last question is just related to the one policy that's in the agenda that we aren't separating out, that we're having a second reading on. And I just think anytime we are adopting a new policy, it's good practice just to note for the record that we've got a new policy. And I was wondering if Mary Kane, the attorney, the lead on here, could just provide a short description so that we know that this is the new policy of the district.
Sure, I can speak to it. So the 2019 Oregon legislature made a number of revisions to statutes related to employment. They were looking to address some unlawful conduct in the workplace. And so they strengthened some of the protections around workplace harassment, discrimination, sexual harassment. We have already a sexual harassment in the workplace policy. And rather than creating a separate policy, because the workplace, the revisions under the statute include sexual harassment, we thought it best to just incorporate the new language into our existing sexual harassment policy. So what the additions that are in there include supports that the district must provide to complainants, as well as notice of their legal and criminal remedies, and also that complainants employers may not include non-disclosure, non-disparagement, no hire provisions in any separation agreements unless it's agreed upon by the complainant. So those are kind of the key components that we have added to the policy and then change the name to workplace harassment.
Thank you, and thanks for all the work that staff did on that.
You're welcome.
And to the committee chair, Moore.
All right. Yes, thank you for bringing that through the committee process. We spent a great deal of time on that. Seeing no further discussion of the items on the business agenda, the board will now vote on resolution 6131 through 6134. All in favor, please indicate by saying yes. Yes.
Yes.
All opposed, please indicate by saying no. Any abstentions? The business agenda is approved by a vote of 7-0 with student representative lateral voting.
Yes.
All right. Speaking of, hello, graduate.
Hi.
It's been incredible to have you with us this year, this crazy year. I think I can speak for everyone in saying we will miss you dearly. and you've accomplished a great deal, not the least of which is really creating a much more solid structure for the district student council. So we look forward to hearing your final report.
Thanks. So over the last couple weeks, I've spent a lot of time reflecting on all of the work that I've been able to do, not only as my time as, student rep to the board, but also just being a student leader within PPS. I've been able to work on the search and seizure policy, the levy, the SRO State of the Union event, working with the Multnomah Youth Commission, giving input on the Lincoln Health Center, hiring of the student engagement specialist, working with students on the grant mural removal, working on senior celebrations in the light of COVID, and having the awesome opportunity to be on OPB and K2, as well as so many other very cool projects that, not many other young people have the opportunity to say they've been a part of. And I feel so fortunate to have been able to meet such hardworking and kind people within PPS and work alongside such awesome change makers, and also have such strong student peers who are really going to, not only in the DSC, but so many other student leaders who are going to really change this education system for the better. And as much as I'm really excited for the next chapter of my life and to go to college and to learn things that I really am passionate about learning, this has been my whole world for like 3 years now, and I truly don't remember what it feels like to have a Tuesday night where I'm not at BESC, eating dinner with the board, talking about our days before rushing downstairs, probably being a few minutes late, and sitting there for hours on hours on hours. So thank you so much to all of you for listening to me and other students, and including us when we have something to contribute, and for investing in student leadership and activism, and committing to bringing in more student voice. And I just ask as I leave, please continue to listen to students and help their projects, give to their projects, and have dialogue with them about what they want to see in our district, not only now with the current state of the world and of politics, but always. It's ridiculously important that not only now where we see such strong student leaders taking a stand, to support them, but to constantly support them. I'm the future, and so are all of these other students. It's just so important. I want to say a big thank you to Yen Seichow and Shanice Clark for being my rocks at the beginning of this. Shanice, like, it wasn't her job, but she was there for me, and we had so many fun meetings. And for Yen for being such an amazing support, even though she was thrown into this crazy world that we are all engulfed in. And to staff members who have been so kind, and especially those who let me sit in their offices and talk about random things for hours and hours and hours. Lastly, just to the whole board, this has been like a crazy learning opportunity for me, and a crazy experience to be an elected official at 17 and 18. It's been such a great year, a hectic year, a drama-filled year, as we all know, but I'm so grateful to have had this experience, and I'm so excited to see what's next for student leadership in PPS with our amazing new student representative, Nathaniel, who you've already heard from tonight. You can see he's going to be great, as well as all of the other students that exist in our district. So thank you.
Hear, hear. I want to recognize the superintendent for prioritizing student engagement and for funding the support that Maxine mentioned in Yen's position and in Jonathan's team. It's really important. It was a cornerstone of sort of your strategy when you arrived, Superintendent Guerrero, and this board had been asking for more of a structure of support for our student leaders. So hopefully, Maxine, that made your job a little bit easier, and we'll continue to be able to lean on that as we are more inclusive all the time in bringing student voice into our decision making. I heard that you ran into Rosanna when she was trying to be stealthy.
She was trying to be sneaky this afternoon. Thank you so much for the flowers and for my gift. I really appreciate it. It's so nice to have something sitting on my table, just bringing a pop of color into my room. I had just got rid of my graduation flowers, so now having some new celebration flowers is wonderful. So thank you so much for those.
Well, please keep in touch. We love it when we hear from Moses and Nick and Alima and all of our past board members and get to see all the amazing things that they're doing. So please keep in touch.
Of course.
And Maxine, I just wanted to say it's been like an incredible pleasure working with you. I'm so impressed with how you've shown up every Tuesday. I don't know if we're connected on LinkedIn, but I encourage you to
let's all connect on LinkedIn. Guys, I'm on LinkedIn. Let's all just connect.
So, I mean, your
network.
Yeah, your network. I want you to just, nobody gets where they are by themselves. And so, you know, I'm in your network now. If there's anything I can ever do, like, don't hesitate.
Thank you so much.
I just want to, just given that we're doing the roundup, Maxine, I loved how you always just cut through everything and just like basically laid it out there. Like, wow, you guys took twice as long as we did to make that decision. And, you know, you were never afraid to like speak up and tell adults in the room when we should listen to students and when we were missing like the main point of something and we were having a long discussion, and you just cut right through to the essence. I always say, like, my kids keep me humble, and I think you kept all of us sort of like on track and focused, and really your ongoing reminder to us of the wisdom that students bring to our discussions and that we shouldn't have them without students. So thank you for bringing that to the board and for your long list of accomplishments this year.
Thanks, Julia.
Anything else for the good of the order?
Let me find my Altoids.
Oh gosh, Scott.
I have so enjoyed.
I love your Altoids. I'll miss your coffee breath so much, she said with sarcasm in her voice.
I've really enjoyed getting to know you this year and watching in amazement as you've done your thing. So thank you, and best of luck becoming a sustainable logger.
Thanks. I'll miss sitting next to you, Scott.
Well, I'll just add that Maxine was my favorite student representative on the board this year. So, no, I think as most of you know, I work with Maxine's mom, and I didn't even realize that until like before I took, and nobody had mentioned it to me. And then also a strange connection. I went to the same college as her dad, which isn't, except it's a tiny, tiny little school in New Jersey. So it is kind of a strange coincidence. So I got this whole strange connection with the family, and I just really enjoyed watching you. And I particularly enjoyed how you told Scott exactly what you thought every week. So that was a highlight of my board experience. So thanks, Max.
Thanks, Andrew.
All right, everybody.
Chair Thompson, if I can also pile on for our departing student rep, a big congratulations on your next chapter, Maxine, and for demonstrating, again, what powerful student leadership can look like. You started off your report tonight listing a whole bunch of really critical activity and initiatives that you played a heavy hand in. So you talked about being around change makers. Just know you've been one of those change makers. So we wish you well. Send us a postcard, and thank you for your service.
Thanks, Guadalupe.
All right, Superintendent, tough act to follow, but now we have some interest in your report as well.
Thank you, Chair. Good evening, directors. And I'm going to be a little brief because we've got a couple interesting topics on the agenda this evening. Good evening also to our listening audience who's catching this via live stream. Just a few slides. This first one is I know we were closed down this past Friday, but I would be remiss if I didn't acknowledge Juneteenth. Hopefully our families received a message from Portland Public Schools, but we're in a unique time in history. Amidst this global pandemic, we're also experiencing an uprising where our Black youth and community members are rightfully demanding that we come to terms with our racist and violent history. And I know that along with me, our students, staff, and community are deeply moved by this uprising and ready to try to answer the call to disrupt this racist anti-Black history. And despite the trauma we're experiencing, one of the impacts of this is a renewed and accelerated commitment to racial justice. So as an educational institution, we are committed to promoting a culturally responsive and sustaining pedagogy. And one tenet of that kind of a pedagogy is that a critical consciousness, a social political awareness that reflects an ongoing commitment to challenge injustice and disrupt inequities and oppression of any group of people. And one way that we encourage the development of this critical consciousness is by embarking on a critical examination of history and culture. The Juneteenth is a special historical day, a day of recognition, restoration, and celebration. PPS joined the millions who on June 19th paused to reflect on our country's shameful history of slavery, racism, and violence. But we commemorated African-American freedom and joy and celebrated the achievements of Black Americans, including those of our Black students, educators, administrators, and staff. We continue to celebrate these achievements and believe we will be a better district and a better country when we celebrate Black excellence every day. So moving on to the next slide, it was momentous for a number of reasons this past week or so. I think it's important to acknowledge a couple of other very important decisions by our country's judiciary branch. The Supreme Court ruled that the executive branch could not eliminate DACA and ruled that the Civil Rights Act protects gay and transgender people from workplace discrimination. So in addition to the aforementioned tenet of culturally responsive pedagogy, at PPS, we want to keep working at building our racial equity, social justice competencies of every adult, the supportive adults, the educator essentials we're always referring to keep working on our competencies, the ones outlined in our racial equity, social justice professional development framework. I mention this because we were talking again earlier about our commitment to adopting a targeted universalism approach that centers our work on improving the experiences of Black and Native students. And at the same time, we want to ensure that all staff have the knowledge and the comprehension of the intersectionality, the multi-dimensionality of oppressions. I bring up these important decisions because they confirm and endorse our belief that the PPS and public education is open to every student. We strive to be supportive, inclusive. We believe we're made better by the diversity in our workforce and our classrooms. And we believe that our commitment to racial equity and our understanding of critical race theory allows us to more deeply understand these intersectional issues that our students, staff, and families experience. This understanding will help us become a district where our students feel that sense of belonging that we describe and that they are truly prepared to lead a more just world. If you recognize that phrase, it's right off the title page of our vision. In this next slide, I want to just put in a plug and remind our community that this Thursday, June 25th, we will be hosting our virtual town hall on the PPS Virtual 2020. Please join us for, I think it's repeated the word, our virtual town hall on the PPS bond. Please join us for this conversation. We want to get the invite out there as we continue exploring the possibilities for the future of our city's public schools, especially in regards to providing the most optimal teaching and learning environments for our students and staff. Already, we are grateful for the safe and modern buildings that have been supported to date and that continue to emerge. Construction is well underway this summer. These buildings, these physical plants, they represent the kinds of learning campuses we want every one of our students to have access to over time. So for the public, our stakeholders, your insight will provide meaningful feedback and input to this board of directors as they consider a bond package referral to Portland voters this coming November, it looks like. So I invite everybody, please visit our website to RSVP for the town hall to learn more. We'll see you on Thursday. And then lastly, a topic that I know is on everyone's mind, especially ours as staff, and something that I know really has our students, families, and educators concerned rightfully, is to try to gain an understanding of what this fall may look like in the way of a reentry for students and staff. Please know reentry planning is well underway. Staff have a full update for you later in the agenda, but I can tell you all hands are on deck for this work, and we're not doing this in a vacuum. Since the initial closures in March, we have continued coordinating with other districts in the metro area, with other large districts in Oregon, and reviewing guidance and emerging plans from some of our peer member districts in the Council of Great City Schools. So stay tuned for hearing more details later on this regular meeting's agenda. And I know that our goal is to provide more frequent updates as the picture gets clearer for the coming fall. So that's one of tonight's main entrees, and we look forward to staff sharing with directors more details. So that concludes my opening remarks for now. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you so much. All right. Next, as we mentioned, we have the opportunity to welcome our new student representative to the board, who was elected by the District Student Council. Nathaniel Shu is a student at Jefferson. We've already heard from him tonight, but Nathaniel, we're so glad to see you. Congratulations on your election. Do you want to take this moment to just tell us and anyone listening in a little bit about yourself and why you're excited about this work?
Yeah, sure. So hi, as you heard, I'm Nathaniel. Just like to tell you a bit about me. I am a soon-to-be senior at Jefferson, where I have been in the middle college program for several years now and have served on the PDSA board. Before entering Jefferson, I went to Ainsworth, along with, I believe, your son, Amy, and Portland Village for middle school. I am the older brother to 3 PPS students, an elementary schooler at Portland Village, a middle schooler at Portland Village, and a high school at Metropolitan Learning Center. And over the coming year, I am looking forward to work with people and the DSC in student voice in district whenever possible. And of course, continuing the work that Maxine has been doing. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Please don't hesitate to let any of us know, your board and your staff, how we can support you.
Welcome, Nathaniel.
Welcome, Nathaniel.
Yes, welcome. Go Demos.
All right.
He's represented there too, so awesome place.
All right, as we can now move on to public comment. I'd like to briefly review our guidelines for public comment. The board thanks the community for taking the time to attend our meeting with us and provide your comments. We value public input as it informs our work, and we look forward to hearing your thoughts, reflections, and concerns. Our responsibility as a board is to actively listen. Board members and the superintendent will not respond to comments or questions during public comment, but our board office will follow up on board-related issues raised during public comment. Guidelines for public input emphasize respect and consideration of others. We request that complaints about individual employees be directed to the superintendent's office as a personnel matter. If you have additional items or materials you'd like to provide the board or superintendent, please email them to publiccomment@pps.net. If you're watching the board meeting via live stream while waiting, please make sure to mute your phone prior to your turn to speak. If you leave it on, it will create feedback, and it's just one of those new Zoom problems, WebEx problems. Please make sure as you begin your public comment that you clearly state your name and spell your last name. You have 3 minutes to speak. You'll hear a sound after 3 minutes, which means it's time to please conclude your comments. Ms. Bradshaw, can you please introduce the first person signed up for public comment?
Yes, Xander Zip.
My comment, I'm presenting with another student, Eileen Castro, and I think she's gonna go first.
Great. Eileen, I see you, Eileen. Or actually, no.
Hello, sorry, I have problems with my internet connection. Are you able to hear me?
We can hear you.
Yes.
Okay. So sorry, hold on. Yeah, hello, my name is Eileen. I'm a junior at Madison, and today I want to talk to you all about why we need more student resources in schools. From my perspective, my household has always set my standards high, and my mom has always pushed me to do the most. I always thought that she was being very strict on me, and since my mom is a teacher, she knows the school system. But sometimes I take that for granted, like I take her support for granted. And I believe that everyone should have someone in their corner supporting them and advocating for them. There are numerous friends of mine and peers who tell me that they don't have someone like this in their life and don't feel motivated to learn. And having mentors and educators that can relate to students on a more personal level is extremely important. This is why having culturally specific resources is a necessity. And that everyone deserves to have the success and confidence that they're capable of, and have visible mentors that mirror them. Like, for example, my 5th grade teacher, Nicole Watson, made such an impact on me because she made every student feel comfortable in their own skin and help prepare us for the real world and the challenges that may come up. And she created a space where we didn't feel judged or under pressure. And she taught me to be proud of who I am and what I stand for and what I represent. She always told us that we are our ancestors' wildest dreams, and I still look back at that message to this day. She helped me become the person I am today, and everyone deserves an educator like her in like their life, right? And so, Step Up is another example of a place where I can feel safe in the school environment. Step Up is one of the only places in school where I feel comfortable going and where I feel connected to others. The majority of the staff are people of color, and I'm able to relate to them in a different way than the rest of the school environment. These resources are irreplaceable as the advocates go to student games to provide opportunities outside of school and are people you can always count on. For example, Franklin High School is able to have a 9th through 12th grade program as they have more funding, while we only have a 9th through 10th one. And the school system is not currently suited to accommodate students who need breaks or who need to have support to function better in the classroom. So these places are useful because students can actively navigate the school system and get back into the classroom. And minority students are already in inequitable spaces and have a harder time living up to the system standards. Funding for these programs is critical and can provide us with resources many teachers don't have the time or capability to help with, as they see upwards over 100 students a day and are otherwise preoccupied with grading and fulfilling the needs of a much larger group of students. So, yeah, to just wrap it up or to let Xander speak, it is important to have resources available for students like myself who thrive on a more personal connection with people in the school setting.
Thank you so much. Xander?
Yeah, so I'm Xander Zip. I'm a senior at Madison. My name is spelled Xanderzipp. And yeah, I'm just gonna go ahead and start. All right, so as Eileen said, the impact that comes from good educators of color cannot be understated. With the termination of the SRO partnership and Mr. Guerrero's promises of social workers and culturally supportive services, we ask that more of the budget be used to fund culturally specific resources in all of PPS schools. At Madison, we have seen a variety of these resources utilized thanks to our open-minded admin and their commitment to hearing student voices. We admire the school board's commitment to fighting for its students in this way, but have come to notice that while overarching diversity collaboratives on the district level are a wonderful start, we still need resources and partnerships that help students head on. Restorative justice had been a practice PPS has played with in recent years. We want to see more of these effective RJ practices and resources utilized throughout the district. Through restorative practices and discipline and throughout the classroom, we can focus on rebuilding damaged connections and severing the path to prison pipeline by focusing on understanding instead of solely on discipline. Student engagement coaches and partnerships with groups like Step Up and other culturally specific resources are also a necessity. These positions and others like it are the perfect way to get students positive role models of color, in educators of color. They focus on connecting with students who otherwise may not have meaningful relationships with adults at school. In our own school, we continuously see this with the creation of The Spot, which is an area in Madison specifically designed to break down traditional school hierarchies. This area, supported by our student engagement coach, is able to facilitate student need in a way previously unthinkable. We as a student body would like to see more of these on-ground resources within all PPS schools. Due to recent turmoil in these supportive positions, we additionally propose that these positions receive unionized protections, ensuring that these jobs will be long-term and not expire after a year or two. This way we can truly reap the benefits of having educators of color in our schools. Finally, we ask that since these resources are for students, they should be chosen/removed by the people who can best quantify their wealth, which is us, the students. As we see these resources on the ground and how they're utilized, we understand their impact better than anybody else. We were against the implementation of SROs in schools long before the board officially severed ties with them. We were for retraining RJ practices within our schools, and yet our partnership with Resolutions Northwest was still terminated. We ask that before the district decides to cut these programs, that the population affected is allowed input. To summarize, we ask the district to fund student-approved, culturally specific resources in every PPS high school and to see an increase in educators of color within these schools. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Ms. Bradshaw, do we have further public comment?
Yes. We have Miro Cox.
Hi, thank you for having me on this call. I would like to talk about the changing the name of the PBS schools from segregationist to something more like accepting. In order to do that, we need to obviously get that petition signed, but also draw more attention to like the racial problems that happened during school, especially last year at Wilson. With all that, like we can't have that happen. If I think having the names of the schools like Wilson, for example, Woodrow Wilson, the segregationist, like that almost draws attention to the racial problems and tension at school. Like getting that changed will help bring more change and difference into the school, as well as giving more voice to the Black Student Union, I think would help. Like, so maybe having more like Black-led presentations for assemblies like having stuff talking about more like the Black Power side of things rather than the slavery side, just to draw attention to everything. Like, I think that's the first few steps we should take. Then, for changing the name, I found a name we could possibly use. Stephanie Diane Wilson was a African American astronaut who has been in space 3 times, which is more than any other African American woman, but it's still with the name Wilson. But it's not related to segregationists. It's related to a Black person who's done good, not bad, I guess you could say. That's really all I have to say. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Ms. Bradshaw?
Huey Hutchison.
It's Wei.
Wait, sorry.
Yeah. Spelled Hui.
Welcome.
So, hi. So you've met my mom, Shelly, and my siblings, Linlin and Roro, and I'm a junior at Wilson High School and an ADL No Place for Hate peer facilitator, an ally member of BSU, a member of the API Affinity Group, and I personally experienced anti-Semitism, anti-Asian comments, racist acts, unconscious bias, micro and macroaggression at the school in the past 2 years. There are multiple issues at Wilson that need to be addressed. All are important, but with historic figures, paintings, statues, and names removed from the building over the past 3 weeks, the issue of the school name has risen to the top. My siblings and I have been advocating for the mural of Wilson to be removed and the namesake to be changed since moving to Portland in 2018. My sister and I collected about 100 signatures in the fall, and Ms. Swanmore, who will also speak this evening, posted an online petition to change the school name that currently has over 1,500 signatures. Woodrow Wilson was a white supremacist who lied to the African Americans during his presidential campaign in 1913. According to a 2015 New York Times article, quoting Eric Yellen, author of Racism in the Nation's Service, quote, historians usually say, here was this amazing liberal progressive who was a racist, which is too bad. Now let's go back to talking about the good things. Wilson's racist actions were seen as extreme, even for the time. His close friend made the KKK movie, Birth of a Nation, and screened the film in the White House. Rand Miller, teacher, author, advocate in New Jersey, where Woodrow Wilson was governor and president of Princeton University, denied African American students entrance and, as governor, created public policies to exclude Black people. He signed into law a sterilization bill fueled by his beliefs in eugenics. As U.S. president, he fired Black supervisors like James Napier, whose signature appeared on the dollar bill printed in 1912. He required photos on all job applications. Wilson was challenged by W.E.B. Du Bois and Trotter of the newly formed NAACP, and they were removed from the White House for, quote, not knowing their place. Wilson is quoted as saying to the New York Times article, quote, if colored people made a mistake in voting for me, they ought to correct it. Wilson initiated the occupation in Haiti in 1915. He blocked a Japanese proposal to include racial equality as a founding principle in the League of Nations. Some say he should be judged according to the times, but racism can never be ignored, must always be corrected and never excused. On Juneteenth 2020, Monmouth University in New Jersey removed Wilson's name from their building. All PBS schools building should be renamed if the name reflects a history or practice of racism, anti-Semitism, sexism, and any and all the other isms. We want the school name and murals that reflect the values we aspire to see in the world. A year ago, my siblings and I researched other Wilsons in effort to reclaim the name. Harriet Wilson in 1859 was the very first African-American person to publish a book. Her father was a free Black man and her mom was an Irish immigrant. Choosing to honor Harriet would be one of hope and inclusion. Other staff may feel traumatized and harmed by retaining the Wilson name, and although the monetary price for change may be more, doing the right thing is priceless. Several of us will be meeting with Principal Reestich tomorrow. He has sent a letter to the superintendent per Admin Directive 2.20.011. We seek approval to rename the Woodrow Wilson High School in a process that will involve teachers, students, and parents, and to be completed by the beginning of the 2020 school year. Thank you.
Thank you. Do we have additional public comment, Ms. Bradshaw?
Yes, we have one more student who I don't see but want to call their name to make sure. It's Mia Sedri.
Are you here, Mia?
Okay. So next in the public comment, we have Ellen Whatmore.
Welcome.
Hi. My name is Ellen Whatmore, Whatmore. I've been a teacher at Woodrow Wilson High School since 2009. I'm here to present to you a change.org petition that was started on June 16th, 2020, and has since been signed by 2,000 signatories, including current and former students, staff, and administrators. While there's much staff support for this initiative, I wanted to center student voices tonight. Here are some comments by former student Maddie Limon, class of 2020. Portland Public School Board. Throughout the American K-12 education, students learn about the leaders that have led America through trials and tribulations, their acts of bravery, and their noble causes. We learn the conventional story of America, one that still permeates many people's notions and beliefs. Yet what we students don't learn is the counter-narrative, all the dark and awful things that make these men seem less like brave leaders and more like scared cowards. That has never been more true than for the 28th president, Woodrow Wilson, after whom our school is currently named. Students and educators alike have pushed for the changing of the school name for years now. A name holds immense power, and the name of our school shows that we inherently, upsettingly, are standing on the side of a racist oppressor. And why? Because of tradition, legacy, conformity. This name does not show what we, the students, the educators, the faculty, the community stand for. This community strives for, works for, and promotes equity within our school. How are we supposed to move forward in equity and social justice work as a predominantly white school if we are inherently connected to a racist past? Signed, Madeline Limon. Additionally, some excerpts from a letter written by current student Mia Sederi, class of 2021, to the superintendent. Dear Superintendent, during this time of racism and hatred, many institutions are currently trying to figure out what the right thing to do is. What are we, Woodrow Wilson High School, going to do? To me, the answer is clear. Remove our connection to Woodrow Wilson, a racist KKK supporter who actively perpetuated the dangerous systems of racism that remain today. How can we have a school named after a president who resegregated the nation, stopped efforts in racial equality, and supported the KKK? How can we grow as a community under his name? In this very moment, we have the choice to either continue honoring a white supremacist who reinforced segregation, or we can change the narrative, working towards equity and inclusion by uplifting communities of color. This is the very first step, the bare minimum of equity work. I've not even begun to address the lack of diverse curriculum or the disciplinary policies in public schools that foster the school to prison pipeline. I've just scratched the surface of all the work we need to do, but a journey of 1,000 miles begins with a single step, Lao Tzu, and it's time to take ours. Thank you for your time, Mia Sederi. The language of the change.org petition reads, for years, students and staff at Woodrow Wilson High School have raised concerns about the racist history tied to the name of Southwest Portland's only comprehensive high school. What message does it send to our students, especially our students of color, that they walk the halls of a building bearing the name of President Woodrow Wilson, given his racism and bigotry? Multiple articles have surfaced President Wilson's racist beliefs and actions. We cannot afford to let this racist legacy live on. Students have circulated paper petitions before, but it's time to organize our support for these students and add our signatures. Black students and students of color have long carried the burden of anti-racism activism, but it's time for the entire school community to join with them in bringing social justice to the school. After all, what better step can we take toward improving school climate and inclusion at this majority white high school than to remove the name of one who promoted segregation? We, the undersigned, ask that Portland Public Schools work with students, faculty, and community members to determine a new name befitting the school, one that communicates the school's values of inclusion, diversity, and equity. Thank you for your consideration.
Thank you so much, Ms. Whatmore. That was really moving.
I'm sorry, who was that?
That's Director DePass. I just said I thanked Ms. Whatmore for her testimony and for showing up. I just want to send an appreciation for calling out things that are becoming more and more obvious.
Agreed. Thank you. And I think we're gonna, we have staff working on outlining the process for supporting some of these student-led efforts, which are arising in many of our schools now. So thank you very much. No further public comment, Ms. Bradshaw?
Chair Constan, at some point, could we get an update on, this is the first I've heard that someone's addressing it at all, and I would appreciate kind of being kept in the loop in terms of updated on, you know, not necessarily who's working on that, but what's happening with that. If we could get an update every now and then, so we know what to tell community members, because there's a lot of conversation around this renaming and murals and going on right now. I know there's a process, and I would just benefit by having additional information regularly updated.
Agreed. I think we all would. And so that it's clear to the public how to bring those efforts forward. Ms. Bradshaw, was that it for public comment?
No, we have Darshanpreet Gill.
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. Hi, my name is Darshanpreet Gill, spelled Gill. I work at Madison High School, and today I want to tell you about my experience as one of the small number of educators of color in this district, so that you can be more informed and effective about not only recruiting us, but retaining us. I know that the district continues to put out resolutions, policies, budgets, and press releases meant to center and serve students of color, yet it keeps burning through the educators of color that are proven to be critical to that work. Before I delve into my experience, I want to acknowledge that as a South Asian woman, while my experience has been difficult, I know it's been far easier than what my Black colleagues suffer through daily. I can't imagine the mental toll of working for a state that actively excluded your ancestors, a city that redlined your families out of maintaining community and building generational wealth, and a district that has allowed, according to the 2019 state audit, a 53% achievement gap to form between your children and white children. I was recruited by PPS from my hometown of Fresno, California, in an effort to diversify this district and better serve the needs of students of color. In the recruitment process, I was constantly assured that I was going to love it here. Having been here for 5 years now, I sincerely wonder if they talked to a single classroom teacher of color in this district before giving me that assurance. I know the truth isn't flattering, but it saves educators a lot of emotional labor and time when we don't have to dedicate our own mental faculties to try to reconcile the difference between what we're told we'll experience and what we actually experience. Having been through the recruitment and retention process, I'm still deeply invested in growing the number of educators of color in this district because our students deserve it. However, to best do this, there are some things that have to change. One, there has to be transparency during recruitment. Please be honest about the huge amount of intellectual, emotional, and spiritual work you're asking us to take on right from the start. And if you don't know how to be honest about that, ask those of us who are still here before we burn out and leave too. Two, set us up for success. Since being recruited 5 years ago, I have taught at 3 different schools, had students that ranged in age from kindergarten to 12th grade, and taught 9 distinct courses, most of which I had no background in nor curriculum for. How does this set me up for success? Please work with the union to prioritize the appropriate placement of educators of color. Our students do not benefit from watching us being poorly treated too. And finally, third, please mandate student feedback for all teachers. One of the biggest challenges I've faced as an educator of color is the disconnect between the known harm that is being done to our students of color in classrooms around this district and the actions taken, or more often not taken, by administration or the district. The most significant ask I can make from you is to mandate that students be given a chance to provide feedback for all of their teachers so that we have actual data that is seen and acted upon by administrators and is used in a clearly laid out process to identify educators who are harming the very kids you continually say you're prioritizing. In closing, I want to thank you for hearing me out, and I strongly encourage you to solicit further input from other teachers of color around the district about how to honestly recruit us and actually retain us. Thank you.
Thank you. Appreciate
that. Kate Maloney.
Thank you. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Awesome. Thank you. My name is Kate Maloney, Molony. I teach at Madison High School. Tonight, I'm thinking about how we can all work together to realize your ambitious budget document, which acknowledges PPS's historical underservice to the Black and Indigenous communities of Portland and commits to center them and also our Black and Indigenous newcomers in our collective efforts moving forward. I'd like to offer ideas about 1, inquiry-based education as an anti-racist curricular priority, 2, the unworkable tension between current capitalist grading systems and school schedules and the graduate portrait, and 3, concrete solutions from students and colleagues to assist in marrying the discourse and pedagogy within our current staff and structures. First, inquiry-based education has changed me as an educator and helped me get out of my students' way. Allowing students to pursue their learning according to their own interests, values, and passions has changed student relationships to school. With students at the center, staff have fewer opportunities to cause harm or minimize a student's culture or experience. Invest in inquiry education at all possible junctions. Value every human in the building as an educator. PSU senior inquiry for all PPS seniors with sliding scale credit cost offsets in more wealthy schools in areas of the district. Second, grades in their current iteration are racist capitalist dog treats. Schedules of 8 rigorous classes are too much for our students, do not allow for the type of relationship building and support that our students crave, and do not mirror the college schedules for which they are supposedly being prepared. They also cause anxiety, depression, and internalized racism, or worse, exacerbate already existing mental health challenges in our precious young people. Audre Lorde taught us that the master's tools cannot dismantle the master's house. Without reorganizing schools around communities, love, and justice, the vision of the budget and the graduate portrait cannot be achieved. Students need more relationships, different grading systems, fewer courses, and more flexible opportunities to design their own high school experience, as supported by PPS's adoption of the Universal Design for Learning philosophy. Students should be allowed to accelerate, get more credits for employment, and have agency in designing their own high school path. Finally, marrying the discourse with the pedagogy is the true challenge here. With a teaching staff and delivery system largely made of Portland area well-meaning white folks, many of whom are in day 1, 2, or 3 in their learning about whiteness, I fear the budget document may struggle to live up to its own aspirations. Here are concrete ideas from students and teachers that would contribute to System Shift A, Strategy 1, where PBS commits to encourage and support an inclusive culture that leverages community voice. 1, have a student and parent on every hiring committee, even for BESC positions. 2, have students evaluate their teachers, work with PAT to include student assessment and teacher evaluation. Yes, even elementary students could do this. 3, establish a clear protocol with PAT similar to sexual harassment reporting that allows racism to be interrupted in our buildings and holds staff accountable to anti-racist learning and change. 4, mandate that staff learn and use the same restorative justice practices we expect our students to use in working through conflict. We cannot expect students to use these skills when we do not. If you're looking for student voice, please read the link that I had Kara Bradshaw send to you of student voice in my senior inquiry course at Madison. I hope that we are going to be able to pull off your budget. It's an incredibly aspirational document, and I hope that we can make it happen. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Chair Cossum, I have 3 people who signed up that I don't see. Again, I would like to call their name to make sure. We have Minnow Cleveland. And Andrea Strauss. Andrew Harvey.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Bradshaw. Thank you, everyone, for your comments. Please feel free, all of you, to connect with Board Manager Roseanne Powell if you have something you'd like to follow up on with the board or the board office, or something you'd like to submit for us to read. Now, Superintendent Guerrero, as a board, we've very much been looking forward to learning more about all the work that's been underway, planning for school reopening in the fall. Would you like to introduce this item?
I would, and I want to make sure and manage the board and the public's expectations. We won't be revealing all the mysteries of the universe, but we will give you a strong sense of how we're thinking about all the moving parts that come with contemplating a reentry this coming fall. So This is a really large group effort. A couple of board members, I think, observed that yesterday in a meeting. But we do have a couple of individuals that are sort of playing the role of internal coordinators to this effort. So as I mentioned earlier, we look forward to just more ongoing communication from here on out to our families and to the board. So we have a deck for you, and we have a few folks that are going to talk you through it. But I am going to turn it over to Brenda Martinick, our Chief of Student Supports, and Dr. Sean Bird, our Chief of Schools, who are going to provide the board this evening with this overview of where we are in our planning for reentry to school in the fall.
Thank you, Superintendent. Good evening, Board Chair, ConStam, board directors, and our community and staff. We're really excited to talk to you about our fall 2021 reentry planning process. So I'm going to have Sean kick it off because we're first going to start talking about our guiding principles, which really kind of points us and is our North Star in combination with our vision and our strategic plan. So Sean.
All right, good evening, everyone. Chair Constam, Vice Chair Moore, members of the board and community. If you can go to the next slide, please. As we are planning our reentry for the fall, we have 4 guiding principles that are guiding our work. The first and most critical one is to ensure the health and wellness for our students, staff, and buildings. So this is not only about making sure we have social distancing in place and sanitary processes, but we also know that this pandemic has caused trauma to many in our community. So we want to make sure that as we plan to return to school, that we're prioritizing trauma-informed care and support for our students and staff and our communities. So social emotional well-being is an important cornerstone of this plan. The second guiding principle is to strengthen and innovate the instructional core. So we want to make sure that our students are learning through rigorous and relevant tasks, regardless of the method of their learning, whether it's face-to-face or distance learning, to make sure that we are living up to the dispositions that are reflected in our graduate profile. It's also a principle that's deeply rooted in our theory of action and acknowledges the priority to center our plans on improving the academic experience, particularly of our Black and Native students. Third, we want to make sure we center racial equity and social justice in our plans. So that's the overarching approach to reopening, is to embrace our relentless pursuit of racial equity and social justice in our plans. We want to, as we work to reopen schools, we want to acknowledge and recognize that the inequities of our system prior to the coronavirus, and we don't want to reopen schools by going back to what was going on before. Rather, we are engaged in fundamentally accelerating and centering our racial equity and social justice work. And then the final principle is to cultivate connection and relationship. So we know that quality learning experiences can only occur when there's deep interpersonal relationships and a learning environment where children feel seen, known, and loved. Particularly in this time where kids have been out of school for what will be about 6 months from face-to-face instruction, we want to make sure that we are supporting families and students as they return. Next slide. I'm going to turn it over to our superintendent to talk about the ODE Blueprint.
Actually, I'll go ahead and take that one.
Okay.
Sorry. So what we did is ODE came out with blueprint guidance around the second week of June, and it is divided into 8 components of the blueprint. The first 3 sections is really around the health and wellness of our staff, our facilities and school operations, and how we respond to the response. So what we're currently doing right now is developing our communicable disease plan, specifically around COVID-19. That will help lead us with those 3 components of the blueprint. The other 5 components are around equity, instruction, mental, social, and emotional health, family and community engagement, and staffing and personnel. So what we have done is we have started to align our reentry teams in accordance with some of the blueprints, and then also around the key components of how we're going to reopen schools. Next slide, please. Next slide. Thank you. So as you can see, the public health, oh, go back one, thanks. Thank you. So as you can see, our public health and school reentry plan is really based on a number of different factors. First, in order to operate our schools, even in a hybrid, in any case that we would start to bring back staff and students, we would have to meet the first 3 components of the blueprint document. Once we do that, then we start to look at the planning and development of our blueprint for reentry. And so that really talks about our blueprint plan, the engagement opportunities, how we have interpreted and incorporated our communicable disease plan into all of our planning documents and our reentry plan. And then once we have met all of those, then school would be considered ready to welcome staff and students. And so we have to actually meet all of these key components within the 8 components of the blueprint document. Next slide. Thank you. So what I did want to talk a little bit about is our partnerships. We have started working with the Big 5 districts in Oregon, which you can see all 5 of those districts there on the screen. We started that a couple weeks ago so that we could start to align our thinking, have discussions about what other districts were facing, the challenges, and some creative ways to start looking at how we re-enter in the fall. Another thing that we did is we contracted with the district management group. This group is helping to lead all 5 of these districts in Oregon around a peer review and a strategic framework in order for us to really look at the planning process, look at our implementation components, and look at that through national information that they will help provide to us, and they will also help review our plan, and then we'll also get some peer review from our 5 districts in the state, and then other districts around the nation. The other thing that we have done is we're partnering with Multnomah ESD, our Education Service District, our Oregon Health Authority, and the Communicable Disease Center, so that we can help, we can actually devise the communicable disease plan so that we can get started on those first 3 components. All right, I am going to turn it back over to Sean.
All right, go to the next slide, please. So briefly, we have some several planning teams that are in place, and so these are the sort of 6 buckets of work that we're looking at. So of course, the most important is the instructional core and our professional development that we'll be providing for teachers, and then social emotional learning. Operations are things like how do we make sure we maintain social distancing? How do we make sure that children are in stable cohorts as is recommended by the ODE guidance? We also are looking at security, transportation, those kinds of issues in the operations team. Equity and Access Committee is looking at our racial equity social justice lens. Also, making sure that we are providing necessary tools for homeless children, students with disabilities, students who are learning English still, and also any students that are from our most vulnerable populations. Also are looking at what resources we need, so things like PPE for our staff, protective equipment, that is, and other resources that we need to operate in an environment that is different than we're used to. We'll also be engaging our stakeholders, and I'll talk about that more in just a minute. And then we're partnering with the groups that work with us in our after school and childcare. There's a committee that's working on that to make sure that we can operate those committees when we reopen school. Next slide. We've made a lot of progress to date. We still have a lot of work to do, but we have made some progress that I want to share with you. When we first began our extended closure, we did, as you know, distribute Chromebooks and help families that needed Wi-Fi. We help them get that in place. So we know the areas that we still need to work on in terms of strengthening Wi-Fi. We've also ordered and have in our warehouse technology that will help meet the needs of students. We have perfected our nutrition services. We've served hundreds of thousands of meals during our extended closure, so we have solid plans in terms of nutrition services. We are currently working on plans if we had some hybrid version of school on how we would allow for nutrition that's spaced out so that students are not too close together, so we can maintain social distancing. So we're working on those kinds of plans in terms of nutrition services. We just completed our capacity analysis for all of our buildings, so we know exactly how many students can be in each classroom. We have also been working on our busing capacity and what protocols we would need to have in place for cleaning those buses in between runs. We are working on our high school and, well, all of our scheduling, but particularly our high school scheduling and how that would work. Most of our high schools currently operate on an 8-period schedule, A-B schedule, so we would look at if we need to make modifications for that in case of a return to school that's not the typical brick and mortar school day. And then we're looking at how we can engage our community. So there will be different opportunities for community members to give input on these plans. We've been in discussions with our labor partners, and those will continue as our plans evolve. And of course, we are monitoring the CDC for advice on how we maintain the best hygiene standards. We have done some surveys already, and there are more surveys that are planned so we've done our teacher survey to allow them to reflect on what worked well during the extended closure, and then what kind of professional development and other services they need. We're also planning a survey that will go out soon to families to get their feedback on different scenarios.
And Dr. Bird, if I may here, this is Jonathan Garcia, Chief Engagement Officer. I want to make sure just to highlight that the surveys are meant to go wide, cast the wide net of staff, students, parents, community members, etc. Then we will be hosting a series of focus groups that allow us to go provide some in-depth feedback to the work ahead. So and as the board knows, our commitment is to ensure that our Black, Native, and communities of color are centered in our conversation and in our work. And so as we plan these focus groups, that will be front and center. So I just want to highlight that surveys are meant to go wide, cast a wide net, and our focus groups that we'll be hosting will be about going deep with communities, especially communities that systems, institutions like ours tend to leave last or leave them out whatsoever.
Thank you. And next slide, please. So finally, our next steps, Jonathan just mentioned one of them, that in addition to surveys, we'll have in-depth opportunities for people to respond to our plans and to provide feedback. We will continue to monitor the progression of the coronavirus, and that will obviously have an impact on our plans. So we will be in consultation with the Big 5 districts, but also have information and regular updates from the Oregon Health Authority and the CDC. We'll be implementing a regular communication plan. So this is the first step in our communication plan. As we plan more, we'll be communicating on a regular basis with families. And so there'll be a regular cadence of communications that people can expect. We're finalizing different options. Once we have had a chance to get feedback from the community, as Jonathan just referenced, we will take that input and finalize our options. And then we will be paying particular attention to the high-risk populations, the students that are most vulnerable, as Jonathan alluded to, and also our students with disabilities, to make sure we have plans in place for accommodation and prioritize services for those students who are the most vulnerable and have been out of school for this duration of time. I would also just like to add that we do have summer school programs in place for some students, and that is giving us an opportunity to try out some of these protocols. So students that are in our CSI schools, which are most underserved communities, will be participating in some limited summer opportunities, so that we can connect with those children and make sure that they are having educational opportunities that it may have been harder for them in a distance environment, but also so that we can work on our protocols, make sure we have the right things in place for social distancing and those recommended guidelines. That is our presentation. We open up for questions.
Quick question on your last point, Mr. Bird. Are those summer programs a hybrid, or are those all virtual at this point?
So the ones I'm talking about for CSI schools will be mostly virtual, but there will be opportunities for small groups of students to come into a building, no more than 5 to 10 students at a time, and there'll be opportunities for them to work with the teacher at certain points through that time. Those don't happen until July.
So this is Julia, just a question about summer school again, because I do think it's a great opportunity to, we're doing something similar in my workplace, do sort of a phase in, so dip the toe in to see how things go and be able to sort of, check and adjust as needed, but with a much smaller population instead of just doing things full on at the very beginning. And I'm wondering if part of that this summer, whether we would partner with OHSU or another healthcare partner to give us a review, just given our core competency obviously isn't the health standards and requirements, of whether that's something that we've talked about doing as we prepare to open, just so that if we need to make any adjustments, now's the time to make them while we have a smaller group and it's more manageable.
And that is our plan, Director Brim Edwards. Our plan is to, specifically for the summer programs, is to implement our confirmed case protocol, our contact tracing, our log in and log out, how we move cohorts in and out of buildings, how we physically distance, how we monitor bathrooms, entries, exits. And so it's really a nice time for all of the things that we have been developing for us to implement on a small scale, so that we can kind of beta test them in order to start in the fall. And so we will have some lessons learned after that, and we'll be able to go back to tweak things, to work with our partners at Oregon Health Authority and Multnomah ESD, and revise our plans after that.
I just have one quick comment, and that's that I imagine the kids that we're going to be serving in summer school are, low income and kids of color. I'm just broadly just guessing, and I'm hoping that the protocols that we put in place are mindful of that fact that they're going to be out there, and that we're taking the steps not to exacerbate those statistics that we all have heard about in terms of who's impacted first and longest and the most. So I appreciate your attention to those details.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I have a couple.
Director Bailey.
Hi, Director Bailey.
Okay, can I, yeah, thank you. Sorry, it's the etiquette here is always challenging. First, I want to say thank you to our staff. you all have risen above and beyond this year several times already, and this is just one more example of doing way more than you signed up for. So thank you for that. We keep our neediest students first and foremost, especially our African American students and Indigenous students going forward. As nothing would delight me more than to be, quote, back to normal, although I'm not sure if normal is where we want to return to in the fall, but I'm assuming we're going to be somewhere else. And if we're dealing with, say, limitations of 10 students in a class, and just thinking about that, how do we, I would think that we would want to prioritize in-person time for our neediest students, which would mean maybe more days per week or more hours per day that they are in a pretty small, 10 or 12 student classroom. But I'm also aware that there's a real imbalance in terms of our schools, and I'm thinking just elementary here, in terms of the number of students who are, really need that attention now, especially after this last year. How do we balance staffing in a situation like that?
So
I'm guessing you're thinking along those kind of lines.
Right. Thank you for the question. We actually just today began conversations with our largest labor partner, the PAT, about these kinds of issues. There are certainly social distancing guidelines that we follow, and that's why we did the capacity study of our buildings. We have talked about different scenarios, and we have groups of teachers, principals, and staff, central staff that are looking at different scenarios. So yes, we are prioritizing those children who are from our most underserved communities. Also, we want to be mindful of the youngest children, kindergarten, first, second grade. How can we make sure that we are maximizing their time? One of the things that we know about schooling is that relationships are critical. And so distance learning worked because we had been in school for several months before. So kids knew their teachers, they knew their routines. For a kindergartner to start school without having some FaceTime with their teacher would be challenging. So we're thinking about those kinds of things, and particularly those transition years where children are going to new schools. We want to be mindful of how much time they're in the building, and also this children who are having the most academic struggles. So again, we have the summer school program for some of those children to sort of get a jump start or kind of close some gaps. But then we have different scenarios that we're planning, and we'll be asking for feedback from people along the way, and definitely working with our labor partners for staffing those classrooms.
And real quickly, we'll be doing the kindergarten transition program this summer.
EKT. Brenda, do you have information on that?
I believe that we are doing EKT. Maybe Dr. Valentino, do you have an answer for that specifically?
As of now, it was not going to be offered due to budget. We're going to continue to look at it just as we arrived and actually saw what the availability of funds would be.
Yeah, so we are going to provide extended school year for our students with special needs, and that will be virtual. We're also implementing our virtual scholars program, and that will be also virtual. We do have a number of virtual summer programs within our MPG programs for our students who are, some of them are our most marginalized students. We are providing a group for Black male youth, and it will be coupled with athletics and math. So that is going to be actually really exciting to kick that one off. And then we're also providing summer programming in our CSI schools. And so those are the ones that we're currently working on right now. They're in a variety of our schools. and they have a different capacity that we will be working on. And I do want to stress to our families that are watching and our staff and our students that that your children's health and well-being is the most important thing to us. And so we take this extremely seriously. We take the cleaning and the sanitization extremely seriously. The contact logging, how we're really breaking students up into cohorts so that we are really ensuring that every student has that 6 feet of physical distancing. And then also how we can then work within those constraints and those parameters and provide an amazing and quality program for our students who have not come back into school since March 13th. So we take this really seriously, and so I just want everybody to know that that is a huge priority for us. And so I just wanted to stress that point just one more time. Any other questions for us?
Yeah, this is Rita. Can I ask? So I was very pleased to see that you're working with a lot of the local partners, and I'm curious what kind of help they are willing and able to offer in terms of both the planning, figuring out what what the criteria are, what are the risk factors that you have to mitigate for, and all that. But also any practical assistance. This is going to be a logistical nightmare, I'm assuming. So could you talk a little bit more about what kind of really concrete support you're getting from those partners, and what your wish list is? What would you like to get that you're not getting now?
Are you gonna make my wishes come true, Director Moore?
I can try, but I need to know what they are first.
Well, I am happy to provide a wish list. Multnomah ESD and our partners with the Oregon Health Authority have been actually amazing to work with. We have a nursing department there that we contract with. They are partnering with the CDC, and so we get access and support and guidance and consultation through them. Multnomah ESD has also offered additional types of meeting groups, facilitation groups with all of our East County districts that are within Multnomah ESD. Some of those we have participated in. Some of those are really focused on more smaller districts. And being from one of those smaller districts, it was desperately needed. PPS has more resources, so we don't necessarily need all of the supports and guidance that Multnomah ESD provides. So those are the partners that we have been mostly working with. In terms of teleservices or teletherapy, we've also partnered with some of our community mental health partners, and then also with OHSU and Kaiser and a number of other medical providers, so that we can start, once school gets up and running, we can start providing that teleservices, it's not teletherapy, but anyway, you know what I mean. And so those are some things that are in the works, but our primary mission right now is to ensure the health and well-being of our staff, our students, and our families, to make sure that we are providing services and supports to our most vulnerable students, and providing our instructional core so that we can continue to move our students forward.
I have a question. Did somebody mentioned earlier PPE, personal protective equipment, and our summer classes and whatever we look like going into the fall, is that something that's provided to staff and students at the district level, or how are we thinking about managing face coverings?
The guidance keeps, oh, I'm sorry, Sean, did you answer that?
I was just going to say the guidance is changing. As you know, it's starting tomorrow in Multnomah County. Everyone needs to wear a face mask indoors. So we'll be following that guidance from the governor. Children are not always necessarily recommended to wear masks. Children under 12 are not necessarily, that's not a recommendation for them. But there are certain recommendations in the ODE guidance that was released about office staff either providing a face mask or a face shield or plexiglass as you go into stores now and see. So there are various, I would say, iterations of that are coming out. So we'll be monitoring that as we get closer to opening. But the district has ordered and does have in its warehouse, in our warehouse, some PPE that we'll be issuing this summer for our summer programs to make sure that everyone is safe. We're of course going to continue to use disinfectant to sanitize high-touch surfaces. And just as a reminder to everyone, washing your hands for 20 seconds with soap and water is the best defense against this. So we'll be having hand washing stations in our schools, and we'll be providing routine hand washing time for children when they are in school.
The additional things that we'll be doing is we are ordering the touchless thermometers for all of our building, although we won't be providing that as our first screen. We will be following the ODE guidance, which is a visual screen. It is going to be a process for the second step of our screening, and we will be working with Multnomah ESD and their nursing department, because we are fortunate in PPS to either have a full-time school nurse at all of our high schools, or a 6 or 7 hour a day, 5 days a week school health assistant, who will also help provide that screening and provide those quarantine areas until we can get the student safely home. So.
Thank you.
This is Rita again. So I can understand why you don't want to talk about specifics at this stage, because you're still working out. This is a very complicated thing. Can you give us some sense of what the timeline that you're working on? Do you have any sense of when you will be able to kind of talk in public about different scenarios that you're exploring?
Of course. August 14th is the deadline for the blueprint to be submitted to ODE. So we have to have everything finalized before August 14th. So we do have a very aggressive timeline for decisions. We have actually started rolling a couple of those scenarios out. We'll be starting to meet on those this week and the first part of next week. Our hope, and so nobody can stick me to this date, but our hope is that July 1st, we will have some a semblance of what some of those scenarios could look like. Not that by July 1st, we will be able to publicly talk about that, because we will still have a number of different groups that need to kind of poke holes at it, make sure that we run it through a number of different types of scenarios, and ensure that it is truly a viable option before we share something like that with the public. We don't want to provide different scenarios that then we end up finding out can't work. And so we want to try to be able to problem solve as many of those potential potholes as possible.
And Brenda, is your planning based on the assumption that the school calendar will remain the same, or at least the start date?
That's correct. Our start date, our plan at this time is that our start date would be September 1st. And we don't know what that looks like. But we do know that we're still planning on having the start of school on September 1st.
So before we leave, I just want to jump in with just 2 quick points. One, to thank staff for the work that's gone into this so far. It is incredibly difficult work, and I know in my day job we're trying to figure out how we reopen what are mainly office spaces, and that's incredibly complex. And we're not even working on a timeline. We can open in August, we can open in September, we can open in October. It's maybe 10% of the complexity that you're dealing with when you're dealing with schools and lots of different schools and parents and kids and teachers and the entire thing. So it is incredibly complex, and I thank the staff for the work that has been going in, and you will continue to be running probably at 100 miles per hour for the next 2 months at least. And on this point about communication, I really appreciate this balance, and it's really hard to find that balance. I would encourage the district to communicate as much as possible. I think your instincts are probably right. Putting out scenarios that we end up pulling back would be counterproductive, but putting out information that lets people know we are working on scenarios, we're working through this, what the timeline's going to be. Most of the emails I'm getting right now are mostly just parents saying, we don't know what's going on. And even if we know that we won't know for another month or another 2 months, like that's somewhat reassuring than just sort of nothing. So I even think, between now and August 15th, when your deadline is, a weekly email could be really helpful. And even if the weekly email says, hey, we spent another week working on scenarios and we're going to continue doing that next week, it at least provides some communication.
So we
yeah, that's what we are doing. We're having a communication plan being developed currently by our team and David Roy. Our plan is to have information to staff and families at the end of the day on Thursday, starting in 2 days. We did another communication 2 weeks ago that went out on Thursday. So we will start doing that weekly. And our goal is to also on July 1 come out with some sort of a campaign so that you will see a feel of what physical distancing might feel like and look like. You will see what a student might experience when they're going onto the bus, and what it might look like when they go into their classroom. And then also what our physical distancing visuals are going to be, because we do believe that we need to make those consistent for transition and continuity. And so wherever a student is or a staff member is, they know what those signs are to look for in order to make sure that they're either standing at the appropriate place in the elevator, that they're washing their hands before they enter a building, that they are continuing to maintain that physical distancing when they're getting lunch or grabbing their coat. So we're really trying to think of all of those key aspects to ensure success.
Thank you.
I have a couple questions. I want to just join Director Scott because I'm spending a lot of my time in my professional life with this as well, and it's extremely complicated. And then you add children and youth in it, and it's even more complicated and in a very compressed timeline. I had just questions just in a variety of different topic areas. If we have to revert to a distance learning environment because of either an outbreak or we're in a hybrid where part of the time we're in distance learning environment and the other part in school. I know that this year, just I've heard from a lot of both teachers and parents, just the frustration of not being in their normal environment, and just the challenge of teaching and the challenge of learning or helping your child learn in a distance learning environment. And I'm wondering what lessons we've learned from the last several months that we're gonna incorporate as we pivot forward, and what that might look like, that might be different. Because I think a lot of people were like, hey, we made it through the end of the year, but hopefully if we go back to distance learning, that these three things will be addressed. And I say it wasn't for a lack of effort on whether it was central office staff or teachers or parents trying to help their students. It was just a very different environment. So I'm wondering what lessons have we learned, and what might we change if we find ourselves back into a hybrid or just a plain distance learning environment?
Yeah, so we did definitely learn a lot of lessons from our experience. And so the first thing we did was take a survey of our teachers to find out what worked for them, what worked well for them, and what didn't. And we're doing the same thing with families. But we know, we know some of that information already. So one of the things that we are working on is looking at our technology platforms and what are the most efficient platforms for students to access in a synchronous environment, so they can still go into small groups, and they can still, there's some functionality that we didn't necessarily have available in this iteration that we are working on improving. There definitely are, we want to have more consistent rollout of curriculum. So the central office teams are preparing curriculum so that it's readily available. That is a shift that we've made over time, so that those curriculum teams are working on developing that, so that if we do have to go into this state, it won't be something that we're creating at that time. It will teachers have appreciated that in the spring semester. They appreciate having the availability of it, but now we know we can refine those processes some. Also, we have refined our communication tools with parents. We did that sort of midstream this year when we started using Remind as a tool to contact families. So we have some lessons learned from how best to reach students that are hard to reach. So just those kind of communication strategies that we have been refining. And so yeah, I mean there's several areas, and we're still learning more from families. And as Jonathan mentioned earlier, those engagement sessions, some of those topics will be uncovered and explored more, so that we can learn what worked and what didn't work, particularly for families that we did struggle to keep in touch with. So we want to make sure that we're giving those families the tools they need to succeed.
So just as a follow-up to that, I know one of the challenges was that the way the state order was set up was sort of discretionary. Right. And I'm assuming as we head into next year, the assumption is we're heading back into learning. It may be in a variety of different shapes, but it's not a discretionary activity. Right. And that's not really a criticism. I mean, it is what it is. Like, we're in a global pandemic.
Sure.
But there was a feeling of, just like teachers I talked to and parents, of that really sort of took the not pressure, but just there wasn't a big incentive for students to engage.
Yeah. So first of all, I'd just say I would really commend our teachers for we saw a lot of creativity come out in our teaching force, and I think in some ways, some of the lessons that we've learned will actually transform teaching when we go back to what is a regular environment, because teachers have discovered some new superpowers they didn't know they had in terms of using technology to engage students. And so but yes, to your point, you might remember the order changed over time. First, it was just a focus on social emotional learning, and then it changed we had another order. So I think now that we're going into this, we'll have more guidance. I think we expect some updated guidance on June 30th from ODE that will further give us some outline. But yeah, I think you would see a different. It's not the same situation, so you'll see a much more probably structured environment than we saw in the spring in some ways.
Great. I know there'll be lots of parents and students and staff cheering for that. So another question I had is, and this is like more on the administrative side, and I don't know who would answer it, but the district management group, I'm curious what their sort of health expertise is, or what expertise is it that they're providing to this, and what sort of contract we have with them for the services they're providing.
So we are contracting with the district management group We do have a contract with them. It is for $12,500. It is to help guide our thinking with a framework. And then what they've helped us do is really be a critical thought partner with us in regards to the teams, which members of the team would work well, how we look at our plans through a different set of domains, how we engage our community and teachers and principals, our board members, parent representatives, culturally specific organizations. So a number of different ways in which we engage different stakeholder groups. And then what is really crucial is that peer review and then the national review, so that we're not just working in our own little bubble, but we're working with our plan and how we implement our plan in relation to a global pandemic. And what the DM group is really able to provide us is that global view, that research and analysis, and then peer partners that are across the country who have experienced different things than we have and have been able to be critical thought partners with us on this journey.
And Brenda, is that contract and that process in collaboration with the other 4 school districts, or we have something that's just on our own as well?
That is our own contract. So we have not done a contract in consortium. We have each done individual contracts. So while we're partnering with the other 4 large districts, we will align our plans as much as possible, but we also need to understand and incorporate our community voice, our culturally specific providers, and what our traditions and experiences are for Portland.
I have a question, Dr. Bird, specifically about what we know about learning loss. And can you just talk a little bit about how you're thinking about differentiating learning for our students that we know need it the most and have maybe suffered the most slide?
Sure. So a couple of things. That's one of the reasons we wanted to prioritize summer programming for students that we know are in CSI schools, particularly, as those are schools that are struggling academically. So we'll prioritize some very targeted work with those students in literacy and mathematics. And then moving forward, because of the way school, regular school ended March 13th, so we know that we need to prioritize sort of reshuffling our scope and sequence for next year so that we can, we asked teachers to focus on the most important standards at the end of the year, but we didn't necessarily catch every student. So we want to make sure that every student is kind of level set at the beginning of the year. So all of our curriculum team now is working on reworking those scope and sequence so that they're getting the end of the last year and the beginning of next year. Because as you might imagine, a student in math as a building builds upon a foundation. So you need to make sure those kids have those skills so they can go on to the next level. So there will be some of that differentiation in the curriculum at all levels, but particularly for students that are most vulnerable. That's why we're trying to do some work in the summer as well for them.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Any further questions of staff? Just to echo Director Scott's point, keep us posted and keep our families posted. There's nothing that people are more focused on right now. And we really appreciate just this incredible effort. But that's where the innovation comes too, right?
Right.
That's right.
Challenging times.
That's right.
Thank you.
I'm sorry, I have just one last question because this is something that is like a parent, just like a parent planning question. the whole issue of face covering. So right now, the current guidance is only for those over 12 where you don't have some other like medical reason or reason why you wouldn't wear them. So just to clarify, the district would be providing those, or the expectation is that families would provide them, and if it's the latter, what things do we have in place to ensure that all students would have access to face coverings just as a way to protect their own health, but also to protect the health of our staff and other adults?
So that's something that we're planning for, and as that guidance moves along through the summer, as I said, we have ordered, we have a supply of face masks, and so we would be, hopefully many people will have their own, but if they don't, we'll have them. Just like if you go now and you travel, you have to get one from the airport, from the airline when you get on an airplane now. So we would have a supply of them so that students would have them. They will be accessible to people, but those are details that we're working through right now. In terms of providing that material, those materials.
I appreciate that, and that would be an excellent place to apply our like equity lens, because I'm guessing that people that are struggling probably don't have lots of face masks available, and
right.
So thank you.
And we are, and for our summer programs, we are sending them out to schools right now, and so they have them to use.
That's excellent. Thank you.
Is there, since this is going to be an issue for pretty much everybody, is there any effort being made for a statewide initiative to provide PPE for school districts? I mean, given the burn rate that is probably going to be pretty significant, especially when you're looking at kids, then I think we could have some economies of scale here, both in terms of money and effort. If the state could come up with a system to do kind of bulk ordering for all of this stuff. Are there any discussions of that?
If you'd like me to respond, I'm not sure if someone else was going to. Okay. The Oregon Department of Ed, our school finance office, has been in conversation with business managers, and they are working to do a large purchase and for districts across the state. So that is under discussion and in the works.
I would like to correct one of the summer programs. Originally, the athletic program for Black male youth was only for our Black males. What we have done is we have expanded that. So it is for both boys and girls. And so I just wanted to correct that information.
And what grade levels is that, Brenda?
Dr. Valentino, do you want to add the grade levels?
Secondary.
You're on mute.
Thank you. The program is for middle school students who are using the data that Russ had compiled for us, showed that there was a group of students who would benefit from a summer school experience. And while originally it was for Black male athletes, it's been expanded to it's for both male and female athletes, and it's not only for students of color.
So I did want to correct that information.
Great. I just want to point out again, one of the strengths of our administrative team from the get-go has been systemic collaboration with other districts, and both in Oregon and around the nation. And it just really pays off. Those relationships that have been built is paying off right now.
Yeah, thank you for recognizing that, Director Bailey. I think you observed on Monday. Thank you for sitting in as the chair Constan to get a little bit of insight about basically 100 of the senior leaders in the 5 top districts in the state are collaborating and talking offline in their similar roles. You saw earlier in the presentation just the lists of considerations and questions and strands of work that are going to need a concrete response and modeling, which we're very anxious to share with families. And you will start to witness a more regular stream of communications about it, because we really want to start to have some scenarios that we can pressure test as soon as in the next few weeks. So I think you heard several staff talk about, we're particularly concerned about students who we know this disruption to their learning has negatively impacted their progress. So this is why we're proceeding with some level of late summer programming for certain school communities. But even as we think about the fall, I think what parents can likely expect is our attempt to bring in our youngest students, our students with disabilities, since you know, they're a critical student population. So stay tuned for more. Appreciate the questions. Hopefully we'll have more answers and more emerging plans and blueprints about what folks can expect. And we'll make sure to start posting regular updates on our website as well. So it's handy there for our constituents.
Thank you so much to the whole team.
Thank you.
All right, we still have a couple of pieces of important business left. Tonight we have before us the superintendent's proposed budget for the 2020-2021 school year for us to adopt. We went through our approval process at our last meeting, have had our budget town hall with the community and various focus groups with different sections of the community. And tonight it comes before us for adoption. The board, acting as the budget committee, heard on May 26th the superintendent's full proposed budget with its focus on the core values, theory of action, and concepts our community articulated in our bold vision. Prior to approving the budget on the 11th, we had the opportunity to hear directly from many in our community on how that proposed budget landed and the values expressed therein. Superintendent, would you like to introduce this item?
Yes, thank you, Chair Constam. I certainly want to invite the public, if they haven't already, to peruse the 2-volume proposed budget books, mainly because I would want folks to take note of the preamble, because in there you'll find many of the concepts and themes that we shared with the board regarding our investment plan and how that's really an attempt to resource key priority areas. They're connected to materializing our vision for student success. They're intended to help resource some prioritized educational system shifts. We're looking forward to the fall where we have a similar engagement process for our students and our educators. So hopefully folks will see the through line between, while it may not be the full revenue that we were hoping for, the themes and the priority areas remain important. They might be a little bit scaled down from what we imagined. I do want to say upfront a big kudos for a very large group of budget analysts and financial team members and principals who weighed in, and a lot of stakeholders who helped to shape this budget. So I've enjoyed the conversations. For the viewing public who didn't catch the pre-meeting with the Tax Supervising and Conservation Commission, TSCC, we responded to questions they had, which we provide that opportunity on an annual basis for. We're pleased that they voted to certify this budget without reservation. But thank you, Deputy Superintendent Claire Hertz, who who really sort of has been carrying the PPS torch on this. So Claire?
Mainly, I just want to call out our budget team who has worked countless hours and led by a new leader, Nicole Basson, who has truly shown incredible new leadership. So I just want to our team. She's worked for us for a while, but she was promoted and has just done yeoman's work. So I just want to call her out and her team that has been supporting all of us. And with that, I turn it back to the chair and look for any questions.
Thank you so much. We'll get this motion on the table. The board will now vote on resolution number 6135 to impose taxes and adoption of the 2020-2021 budget for School District 1J, Multnomah County, Oregon. Do I have a motion?
This is Director Lowry. I so move.
Second.
Second.
Go ahead, Scott.
Lowry moves, and Director Brim Edwards and Director Bailey second the motion to adopt resolution 6135. Ms. Bradshaw, do we have any public comment on resolution 6135?
Yes, we have Grace Groom.
Great. Welcome.
Thank you. Thank you, Superintendent Guerrero and school board members for hearing my testimony tonight. I'm sorry I didn't testify earlier. I am a mother of 2 PPS students and have the honor of serving as a second grade teacher at Markham Elementary. So you know how fast and furious this budget time has been. I was rather busy, but I did want to testify tonight just to thank you all for prioritizing our most underserved students with this budget. Some of the shifts made in the budget will make a big impact in the students' lives and create more equitable learning opportunities. One of the shifts in the revised budget since COVID is very concerning, however, and that is the shift. That shift is the cuts to funding our K-5 classroom teachers. The original budget made a major investment from the student investment account to fund 47 K-5 classroom teachers with the goal of creating more optimal class sizes to provide more individualized daily direct instruction to our youngest learners. The revised budget funds just 4 classroom teaching positions district-wide. The student investment account revenue projections from ODE are showing a reduction of 37%, which is big, but PPS's investment into the K-5 classroom teachers has been reduced by over 85%. This is resulting in staffing cuts and increased class sizes for some schools at a time when consistency in relationships, as you mentioned, between teachers, students, and families is most critical. So this shift is not centering the needs of the students. Classroom teachers are the front line of support for students. We are the ones that will be addressing the learning gaps that were mentioned due to the COVID closures. We make sure that families are connected to wraparound services and definitely supporting social emotional well-being of our students every day. I absolutely agree with the superintendent's budget message that we must prioritize the needs of our Black and Native students and other currently and historically underserved students. This is even more true during this health crisis. And I support the efforts made by our equity-minded leadership and staff to maintain or reduce class sizes for the kindergarten, first and second grade classrooms at CSI schools. This is a good first step, but to truly center the needs of students and make the extremely difficult pivot necessary during this pandemic, we really need to reinstate spending on classroom teachers for all CSI, TSI, and Title I schools. One way that this could be done is to shift the holdover amount for responding to high class sizes in the fall to funding K-5 classroom teachers at these schools now. Another way to center students is to prioritize spending on direct service, FTE, over any other investments during this crisis. Curriculum development is important and to improving outcomes, but it can and it should be put on hold during a crisis such as we're facing. Curriculum changes will not provide direct supports to students during the pandemic. Teachers do that. Putting a hold on just $2 million of curriculum development plans, I'm not saying scrapping, just holding, to fund 25 classroom teachers. I truly appreciate the efforts in this budget to support equitable access to learning. We can and we must do better during this crisis to support underserved students. Please do all you can to provide funding for more K-5 classroom teachers for our most underserved students as soon as possible. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Bradshaw, do we have any other public testimony?
No.
All right. We can open it up for board discussion. Any thoughts?
This is Director Lowry.
During this crisis, curriculum development is important, and
Hello, this is Director Lowry.
Hello,
Sorry, my internet is funky. I just was hearing Ms. Groom speak again, so I wasn't sure if it was okay for me to proceed.
Just want to make sure you got the message.
I do think that Ms. Groom's comments really highlight how difficult this has been, that there are so many really important things in a school budget. And I think back, unfortunately can't remember her name, but the teacher who spoke during public comment and highlighted the fact that she has taught, I think she said 9 different courses and didn't always have curriculum for them. And so, as we get these public comments, we as a board, alongside with the superintendent's leadership on this budget, try to weigh all of what needs to happen. And I think the staff has just done a masterful job of that and continuing to be agile and make changes as needed as new things come up. And I think that commitment to our ESJ work, to centering our Black and Native students, it's going to continue to cause us to make uncomfortable, difficult decisions where we are going to have to say no to things that are really good and positive as we continue to move forward in, a pandemic where our budget has $12 million less than we had planned, and where we're, really trying to make system change. So I want to thank the staff for your courage, superintendent for your leadership, and the public for being so engaged and willing to, highlight the things you're seeing on the ground and in your communities. And I think that's the only way that we really can be better as a district is when we all work together. So I'm fully supportive of this budget, and I want to thank everyone for their incredible hard work in this crazy, strange time to get us to where we are.
Thank you. Any further thoughts, board?
I have some questions, but I can go, so other people can go ahead.
Go ahead, Director Brim-Edwards.
No, I mean, people can go ahead. I've got some questions I can ask after other people speak, so go ahead.
No, go ahead.
Okay. Just might pull them up quick. So there's been, since the last meeting, there's been a fair amount of questions from the community about what was in and what was out of the additional funds for the SAA funds that we originally had 39, then it moved to 25. So it was still an increase, but not the increase we thought it was. And there was a document that walked through the initial set of investments, literally line by line, and then the adjustments that staff had made, again, using the filter of the emergent strategic plan and the racial equity lens. And this is maybe a question for Claire, just like where people can find that so people can understand, because I'm still getting questions about like, how do you know what's in or what's out? If you were in the 39 and you're still in the 25, and a lot of community partners are trying to figure out where they are. So maybe Deputy Superintendent Hertz can share like where people could find that information if they were in the original number, where we are now. I think it's posted, but I'm not sure, and I just want to make sure that we're able to point people to a place to at least they'll have the status of where we are right now. It may change, but
there are 3 places. One is on our board meeting materials. Each time we met about budget, there are attachments for each one of those meetings. We also have a budget page that has materials from throughout the whole budget process. And there's also the CBRC, the Community Budget Review Committee's webpage. It also has materials that we've shared with them. And most of the things that we've shared with the board, we've also shared with the CBRC. So, and all of it is on the budget page. So our 3 places to look.
Awesome, thank you. And just as to further follow on, because I think everybody knows it's going to be a little bit bumpy over the next couple months, potentially with the legislature and our funding. Further adjustments, like if there are community partners who are part of that, still part of the existing funds, if we change, there'll be transparency and people will understand if we have to make further adjustments, that'll be all transparent and public.
Absolutely. We plan on working with our community and our board as we revise budgets if needed, as needed.
Great. I know that's really appreciated. So I had another question, and I think this is for the Chief Human Resource Officer, Sharon Reese. So there had been, I'd asked a question earlier about annual evaluations.
Sorry, I can.
Can I go ahead? Oh, there she is. So I'd ask a question about evaluations for central office non-represented staff, and the question had been answered that because of everything that had happened, that it wouldn't be, the evaluations wouldn't be done until a future date. And I'm just wondering if you can expand on that, because I know we were trying to get into a practice of, over the last couple years, of shifting into the annual evaluation cycle and sort of performance management as a performance improvement tool.
Yes, absolutely, Director Brim-Edwards. This is Sharon Reese, Chief of HR, and I'm happy to address that question because performance evaluations are an important tool in both employee development and accountability. So what we looked at in determining to extend the evaluation deadline, which would typically be June 30th, so it would be 7 days from now, if you recognize that we needed to prioritize the needs of functioning and emergency operations, that our entire employee workforce shifted what planned performance goals were due to the pandemic conditions, that our entire workforce had a major shift in what their work expectations were, which were very much upended when we completely changed our operations due to COVID-19, right? And then, of course, on top of that, we had the adoption of a 4-day work week in our work share program to save the district substantial sums of money to devote to next year. So what was really important in that decision was setting conditions conducive to direct observation of employees and meaningful feedback. So we made the determination to extend the deadline for performance evaluations.
Great, thank you.
Yeah.
We have all received all that information. We have that full response from staff.
Right. We got it at 4:36. So I just also want to get on the record. It was also subject of the audit. So the other question, and I guess I'm also going to just say, generally, we didn't have a lot of time in public discussion about this budget because of just the schedule. So I think especially as when we're heading into a pretty difficult economic climate, it doesn't hurt to have a public discussion about the contents of a $780 million budget. So the other question, this is for Deputy Superintendent Hertz about the Secretary of State audit recommendation about benchmarking. And they had a recommendation about benchmarking to identify potential savings area and spending changes just with peer districts. And I'm wondering if you could speak to that. It sounds like while we had a very condensed budget process, that wasn't part of the public budget process, but how that was utilized internally and how it might be utilized externally going forward?
So we have a tool that allows us to benchmark all the data that we submit budgetarily, financially, staffing. There's a statewide database from all school districts. So we have a tool that extracts that data, and we can do comparison with peer districts. And so it's something that we utilize as a tool when we're wanting to compare whether it's salaries or FTE or class size or student achievement. There's a lot of data there that we utilize, and we do benchmarking as we look at where, especially as we're looking to make investments or reductions, we want to understand where we are in comparison to our peers and our dollars per student spent. And so that's a tool that we use internally to just get a sense of where we are as a district compared to others. Now, having said that, it's not always, when you look at our building maintenance costs, they're much higher than other districts because we have smaller schools than others. So you can't always take it, just for exactly what it is. And our schools are also some of the oldest, so many that are over 100 years old. So, but benchmarking is certainly a tool that we use. And in this coming year, because we have some uncertainty with the economy, I've been working with the board leadership to move our quarterly financial reporting more to more of a presentation mode and sharing concepts with the board about what we need to do short-term and long-term in order to make it through this recession and recovery period. So we can certainly bring some of that benchmarking information to the board in those sessions as well.
That would be super helpful. Today, the just example of the comparison on the transportation on a really large contract that we had, to see the comparison of the PPS vis-a-vis Hillsborough was a useful tool. So I had one other question for you, Deputy Superintendent Hertz. When we voted on the budget approval, there was a discussion about out of district travel. And since that last meeting, there's been some changes in that budget. And can you share what they are? Since we had a discussion about it before, but there's been a subsequent change.
Sure. So we made a change to put a notice out to staff that between now and December 31st, we will continue to keep travel to a minimum. And so with restricted travel, then we have also reduced half of our travel budget out of next year's budget, and included that in our reductions to balance the budget.
Great, thank you. And I just have one last question for the Chief Human Resource Officer. We also had a question just generally about pay for non-represented staff. And maybe you could share what sort of the structure going forward we're going to be using for making those decisions, and how it links to the evaluation, if it does, links to the evaluation schedule.
Yeah. So we've been looking, of course, at a number of cost-cutting measures for months now. As we've spoken about frequently at the board meetings, and since we're our service organization, we're very cognizant of the fact that 82% or so of our budget is in salary and benefits. And so, of course, we've implemented the 20% reduction in the work week furloughs. We've reduced vacancies, we've reduced layoffs, or we've done some layoffs. And one of the things that we've been holding on to as a possibility is what happens with non-represented salaries. There are two ways that employees get increases. One is steps, so that's moving up the salary schedule based on years of service. And then the other is a cost of living increase. And those are two different assessments about whether or not to hold those in abeyance. With step increases, there are issues of pay equity, especially under the Oregon Pay Equity Act. And then there is, of course, concern about continuing to stay competitive in our market. So with a COLA, COLA increase is slightly different, right? That's a cost of living. And so, of course, we look at what the market conditions are for employees in our current economy. So we are planning on moving forward with step increases, and we are holding the decision about COLA increases for non-represented staff in abeyance until we have a little bit more information, probably in the next quarter, regarding what our long-term budget is. So we're planning to announce this to employees this week, but that is where we are landing on that decision. I do want to note, because this has been an issue of interest to the public, that what that means is for our senior leadership, they are not on a step schedule. So senior leadership would only get increases through the COLA process.
Thank you for the explanation.
Yeah. Thank you.
I have a question that's going to be a little bit unpopular, but the city of Portland has just frozen all cost of living increases for this upcoming budget year, and also for non-represented staff, any merit increases. And so I'm wondering if we know what the total of that is going into next year for this budget. Like, do we have a dollar figure associated with what those COLA increases are and what those step increases are totaled?
Yes, we do. If you give me a moment, I'll look them up.
Director Moore,
add it
question as well.
I've got a question or two. First of all, don't hurt me, but inflation is currently slightly negative right now in terms of cost of living adjustments. That was an economist joke, so nobody gets my humor. I want to thank you for thank you, Jonathan. Okay. The detail that we got today, and I had a question on, it's the very first function, it's the function code sheet, and the first function code, the 1111 for elementary, that shows a reduction of 37 plus FTE. Some of that's EAs that are being cut is one question. And some of that are teachers who we anticipated hiring with SIA, but are now not going to because of the cuts in SIA. So those are just my two questions of clarification. And I also have a couple of quick follow-up questions after that, but let's start there.
Okay, so the COLA for non-rep staff is 2.2 million. Sorry, I'm responding to the first question. And the step is 1.6 million. And then in terms of the 1111 function, that is, we are reducing some EAs, but then some of so the reduction that you see there, some of that was also picked up by Title I. So while there's a reduction in general fund, there is an increase in the Title I funding to support it. It's not completely reestablished, but it is partially reestablished.
Okay.
And then in terms of
Roughly how many positions are we talking there? You know,
I don't have it in my head, but let me answer the other part of your question. And that is the elementary teachers. It is not, this is just a general fund list that you're looking at. It's not SIA, but SIA
Okay.
had an investment in class size for very strategic parts of the school. And then we also had some in general fund. I mean, for strategic, looking at CSI, TSI, and title schools, and even having a lower class size, but we also had some in non-title, non-CSI schools that would also have had a lowering of class size. When we weren't able to keep that on in the SIA part, we also reduced it in the general fund to balance. So it was a reduction on both sides, but different types of schools. With so the class size overall is the same as 1920. So the meaning the student teacher ratio allocation is the same. And we did lower class size in our CSI schools in the primary grades. And we also added in some of our middle schools the elective programs to get to that 7-period day in some of our most needy middle schools.
yeah, I'm totally supportive of that, funneling those SIA funds where they're going. Okay, and just to clarify, this isn't a reduction in teachers, it's we're hiring fewer, or in some cases not hiring what we anticipated to hire. Is that correct?
So these are a reduction of positions, but not of individuals. That's correct.
Okay.
We still are, we are not hiring as many as we thought we were.
Okay.
So having said that, there could be someone with an obscure license. I always will want to say the caveat. I'm not in HR tracking that. So I just, because sometimes there's staffing decisions that are made that have nothing to do with the budget reduction.
Understood. And we've gotten inquiries from a number of school communities about, I thought we were being held harmless, but we're looking at reductions. So I look forward into getting more detail on that. I know it's shifting as we speak, and it may shift radically more depending on what we're doing in the fall. And also look forward to getting more detail on what's happening with special education services, because I know we had additions in some places, cuts in others, and just getting an overall picture on that.
Well, we will have the individual school reports sometime in July, and we will share those with you. And those based on our actual staffing when we complete our staffing. So the other thing that I would remind folks is sometimes positions shift. A school might get an extra teacher over last year because their enrollment is up at a grade level. But there's also another school that might lose a teacher at a grade level because their enrollment is down. It doesn't mean the allocation change. It doesn't mean a budget reduction, but we allocate based on class size at each grade level.
Yeah.
So sometimes there are shifts that have nothing to do with budget.
And sometimes principals still have some discretion for allocation as well, as I understand it. So
yes.
Okay, good. I'll look forward to that. And are you going to set up a separate fund in the budget for SIA, or will it be?
It's a grant fund, and there's a one designated by ODE that all districts across the state are using.
Okay, cool. And again, thank you all for, again, incredible work. Just in a very short timeline, having to really turn things upside down.
Thanks, Director Bailey. Director Moore, I think you were trying to chime in there a little bit earlier. Do you have any comments you'd like to make on the budget or questions?
I just wanted to kind of echo what other people are saying. I think this is an extraordinary amount of work under extraordinary circumstances, and I wanted to join everybody else in thanking the staff for all of the effort that's gone into this. I have only a small window, I think, on how much effort has gone into all of this on the part of all the central office staff, and I am humbled by it. I think it's been, I'm going to overuse the word extraordinary, but it has been. So I want to thank everybody, and I think it will be helpful when we get the school by school reports. One thing that I think would be helpful for us as board members is to understand which staffing changes are a function of a central office decision and which ones are a function of principal decision making to use discretionary funds to respond to the needs for their individual school community. And I guess the last thing I would say is from the comments I hear, from the emails, from text messages I'm getting from various community members, parents, teachers, I think it's important that we underscore how difficult the circumstances are for this coming year. I think the fact that the staff have managed to mitigate the impact of an enormous budget shortfall because of the pandemic has kind of shielded people from a sense of reality around what the economic situation really is and how it's going to be impacting school districts all over the state. And so I want to thank the staff for figuring out how to do all of that mitigation. But I think the downside is that we haven't done as good a job educating people about the kind of situation that we're going to be facing in the next couple of years, at least couple of years. So as we go forward with the budget amendments over the summer, and then as we look ahead through next year, we're going to have to be endlessly flexible, I think, all of us. And we're going to have to be really careful with the resources that we have in order to mitigate the impact of probably even deeper budget cuts at the state level for the 21-22 school year. So whatever we can do to economize this year while maintaining as much of a quality educational experience for our kids and try to shield them as much as possible from these impacts. We have to balance that with being prudent about using scarce resources with an eye toward the next 2-3 years. So that's all. Anyway, thank you, everybody.
This is Director Lowry. I wanted to say a piece about the staffing portion. I have been on the other side of this. As a parent at Llewellyn, I came and stood in the boardroom with a sign because we were angry about the staffing allocation for Llewellyn. I was the foundation vice president at Selwood Middle School and president there for 2 years with the foundation, raising funds to help add staff to those schools. And I really wonder, how much is staffing a management function rather than a board function? And I know when we get those pleas from teachers, from students, from families about class sizes at their school, I know that class size is one strategy as we look at meeting our board goals, and that, as we look at the cuts that have happened to the budget, that, we're also looking at social emotional learning, we're looking at reading specialists, that, it's really hard to get those emails about my kindergartners in a class of 25, and that's too many. And yet I think that, what Guadalupe and the staff have established is that they have a very detailed educational strategy around how we are going to move students forward. And so while it's helpful for us to know some of the staffing piece, I think what I've come to realize as someone who's advocated on the other side is that often the thing that I as a parent saw or advocated actually caused harm to other schools by asking, at one point at Llewellyn, we had, 30 first graders in a class. We've had, 35 fifth graders in a class. No student should have that. And yet if Llewellyn got an extra teacher, what other school didn't? And so it's a really, really hard, difficult conversation, and it's very emotional, but I also think to some extent we need to trust the superintendent's vision of how he uses the resources we have to meet those board goals. And so I ask us as an entire board, having been on the other side of this issue, to really think thoughtfully how we engage on it and how we support the superintendent's vision and strategy in staffing allocations.
I absolutely agree. I'm just interested in having the information to be a better communicator with the public. I'm not interested in second guessing people who know a lot more about the ins and outs of staffing than I do.
Yeah, and as Director Scott, I just want to echo both of those points. I think it's Director Lauer's point is really, really important. I've got a couple schools in my zone that I'm getting emails about, just like other board members are as well. And what is interesting to dive in, some of it's budget related. They thought they were going to get an increase that they're not getting, and like Deputy Superintendent Hurt said, some of it's also enrollment based. And and some of these are schools that have gotten a little bit less poor and have fewer underserved students, disadvantaged students in the school, and they may have lost their Title I status. And those are unfortunate, but that does mean that the district has made really focused decisions based on equity, based on this vision, and the superintendent's vision, and those resources are going to other places. And it's always hard when there's a line that's drawn, because on one year you're on one side of the line, and the other year you fall on the other side of it. But I think it is important that we as a board sort of understand and be able to talk at that level about it, and then defer some of those specifics back to staff. So I'm agreeing with both of the previous directors. I'll also just sum up my comments on the budget. I'm going to go back to Director Lowry's comments when she opened this conversation. I really sort of, I don't think I can say it any better than that. I think it's been a really good process. It's a chaotic process because of the timing. It will continue to be chaotic. Director Moore talked about, what's coming. We need to be preparing our community for that. I was a little troubled, and I shouldn't be, because I've been doing public budgets a long time, but when people focus in on one particular service, that becomes the service to save. We as a board have to help the community see priorities. And it's not a matter of just one service, whether you save it or not. It's a matter of, do you save that service at the expense of something else? And this is the first year in a while we've had this conversation. Nobody expected it because of the Student Investment Act. We are having it, but we're going to have it again for 21-22 and again in 22-23. And I just hope we as a board can do what we can to communicate with our constituents and with the public around what's coming, so we can have a really thoughtful conversation about how to prioritize and continue moving forward on the district's vision. So thanks to the superintendent and staff, and I appreciate the effort so far, and more discussion to come.
I totally agree, Director Scott and Director Lowry, with those comments. And it brings me back to, one of the pieces that we've talked about since we first received the budget proposal, which is that those priorities are clear and transparent. And that's not how budget decisions have been made in this district historically, or to the extent that they have, it hasn't been very visible to the public. So, you're right, with every push, there's a pull, and we were all sort of amazed that we were able to keep most of the priorities that we had outlined in our Student Investment Act proposal. We were able to keep most of those things in place. So our school psychologists, our counselors, our social emotional supports, our commitment generally to mental health services for our kids. Those are historically things that were considered supplemental to the core work and to the staffing, the classroom staffing. And I think when we're able to see it in terms of the broader vision, they're not supplemental at all. They're in service to addressing our historic achievement gaps and opportunity gaps. And they're also really focused on our children's overall well-being. So just, yes, we need to be able to communicate to the public that push and pull process. And when it is painful to see, staff, classroom staffing reduced, well, what else is coming into your school to serve your kids? And why is that the strategy that we're standing behind and that our superintendent has brought before us? So again, thanks to everybody. I think we've gone around the horn. Director DePass, is there anything you want to add?
Nope. I'd like to just close out with some comments. It's okay. So I just want to close with just some like a hopeful thought, because it would be easy to look at this is we're heading into a really dark period, but I think back to a year ago that it was a culmination of 2 decades of work to pass a major new funding source for schools, the Student Success Act, when it passed in May of 2019, and $1.5 billion that we're going to be going into education, and that would not have been possible without OEA, our partners in OEA and PAT and SEIU and businesses that rallied behind passage of that act. So it gave us a sort of a safety net actually this year that we would be in a much different place if we hadn't had that pass. So I look at that piece, and then I'm also hopeful because our voters here in the Portland area once again stepped up and said, yes, we will pay a fairly significant local option property tax, which adds another $100 million into Portland Public Schools budget. And then I look at, so you take those two things, so the generosity of our community members, our partners in labor and the business community, passing something statewide, and then the PPS staff who took, what was a hopeful, exciting moment, and it turned into, it wasn't quite so hopeful and exciting when we faced a budget cliff, and really helped us build a bridge from where we were, and hopefully that bridge is going to carry us through to the other side, because the reality is we are going to climb back out of it, and we will have the Student Success Act funding, and the commercial activity tax is going to be restored at a certain point in time when the economy comes back. And so I look at it as this is, we're going to have some tough years, but really thanks to our staff who are going to help to build this bridge, and thanks to the community who really provided a foundation that bridge could be built on to get us to the other side, that we've got a budget that is going to serve the students of the best way possible we can under the circumstances we have. And that makes me hopeful and appreciative that I live in a state and in a community that everybody has a different role to play and have totally delivered for our students. So I'm not voting for this budget with I wish it were something different. It is what it is, but it is a good bridge, I think, to a much brighter future for our students.
Chair Constam, if I may.
You may.
I want to appreciate all of the director's comments. When you grow up of modest means, you learn to have a different lens of appreciation oftentimes for things. It's true we've had to make some tough choices. You always have to when you have a finite budget. We've attempted not to debilitate any function of our district, to not have the impact felt in a dramatically negative way for classrooms or schools across the district. When I hear directors highlight, the superintendent has a vision, I would respectfully say what makes it easier, this annual task, is that the community has defined the vision. And that's what's enduring about this work is not just in good times, but in even more constrained times. It keeps what your core values and those priorities are and the graduate portrait that you imagined. And so I would encourage us to talk about the coming school year, remembering all the positives that are integrated into this proposed budget. We're investing heavily in an array of services that fall under an umbrella of racial equity and social justice. We're going to encourage mentorship and student leadership and elevating the partnership that we have with culturally specific organizations in our schools that oftentimes are the only presence of shared complexion in the building. And we need those supports. This pandemic has amplified the importance of student supports and social emotional focus, and that work that in these recent times in current events, that sense of belonging and relationship, we're making investments by making sure that in every school there's access, increased access to counselors, to social workers. And we want to get our kids back into some continuity of experience of learning. This budget builds in some ability to deliver summer programming in our schools that most need some opportunity for not just academic remediation, but take a look at our small visual and performing arts team. If anyone can be creative, they've been creative. They're anxiously on deck to launch arts programming. Who would have thought that we're offering arts programming during a pandemic when resources are slim? But we're going to do that because we understand extended learning opportunities are going to be critically important for our students that we say we're placing at the center. I've heard directors talk about during this administration's tenure the importance of reimagining and redesigning middle grades experience. And so we don't have a lot of resources, but yet we've built in expanded electives for our students. We've set aside and squirreled away a little bit of resource to really push redesign work out so that we stay on track with Kellogg and support our middle school, our comprehensive middle grades in parts of town that haven't always had the level of supplemental supports that they're really deserving of. And we have some designated comprehensive support, targeted support schools. And to have an equitable distribution of resources means we're adding more in there to give our students an equitable opportunity to achieve and demonstrate excellence. So I just wanted to sort of end this discussion by reminding us that there's so many positives also built into this budget proposal that are true to our North Star. So we've been going fast and furious, and maybe we're not going to go as deep in our scope for this coming school year, but we're going to continue to make incremental progress. And we've set aside some modest amounts to continue to keep those strands of work alive in our district. So I don't want folks to despair because we're going to continue doing this work. Thank you. And one more mention, again, just to thank the staff, but we wouldn't be in this position if the broader community and our stakeholders didn't understand that we're trying to keep the torch of this vision on fire. And were it not for the labor partnership that allowed us to preserve resources, we would be talking about a lot more cuts and a lot of reduced positions. And so I'm thankful to all of our labor partners, non-rep central administrators. We've done our part. And so that's permitted us to keep our students at the center. So I just wanted to express gratitude and recognize that they played a role in this. And I think you heard some of them express that they were rather surprised because it hasn't been their experience in the past when times get tough. So thank you.
Thank you so much, Superintendent. And thank you again, Deputy Superintendent Hertz, for so capably leading this whole process. The board will now vote on Resolution 6135 to impose taxes and adoption of the 2020-2021 budget for School District 1J, Multnomah County, Oregon. All in favor, please indicate by saying yes.
Yes.
Yes. All opposed, please indicate by saying no. Any abstentions? Resolution 6135 to approve the budget is approved by a vote of 7-0 with Student Representative Lateral, who I believe is still with us, voting.
Yes, and I am still with you, even though I'm very tempted to fall asleep.
All right, thank you. Thank you again, staff. Very, very turbulent water for this process. And, you know, we have an adopted budget, but that's just a continuing conversation as we will reconvene to learn about what's coming to us from the state and to address subsequent budget amendments. So thank you again. Our last order of business tonight is equally important. This is the performance evaluation for our superintendent. Earlier this year, the Board of Education adopted an evaluation tool that acknowledges the complexity of the role of superintendent and establishes performance expectations for the superintendent at Portland Public Schools for the 1920 school year. The evaluation framework is based on the student performance goals adopted by the board in the fall of 2019 and is aligned to core standards identified by the Oregon School Boards Association. We used this framework for Superintendent Guerrero's current performance evaluation, covering the period of July 1, 2019 to June 30th, 2020. The board has reviewed the superintendent's performance and earlier shared this evaluation in executive session with the superintendent. I want to thank the board for a really collaborative process this year, also a much improved board tool that laid out the leadership standards that we were going to address, as well as tied back to the performance goals that the board established. Director Scott, would you like to introduce this discussion?
Yes, I'm happy to, although you may have just taken most of my talking points. So I don't, no, I don't, that's fine. We can wrap it up pretty quickly. No, I mean, as Chair Constam said, you know, we started this process last fall. I mean, this is one of the most important things that a board does, you know, is evaluate the performance of the superintendent. We started the conversation. We decided to hold off on the tool while we set board goals because we wanted those to be a primary basis of the evaluation. So we did get the evaluation tool done a little later than we hoped, but we did adopt it in December. And just as a reminder, it has two different parts. It has our board goals and metrics, and those are, again, you know, 3rd grade reading, 5th grade math, 8th grade readiness, and post-secondary readiness. And so we evaluated the superintendent on progress against those goals. We spent a lot of time as a board discussing and talking to the community about that as well. And then the other part are the OSBA standards. And there are a number of OSBA standards. The superintendent suggested something he thought were key for the district. The board reviewed those and added to that as well. So we ended up adopting 5 or using 5 of the OSBA standards. One of those is around visionary leadership. One of those is around communications and community relations. Another is around curriculum planning and development. A 4th is on resource management, and 5th was on labor relations. So we went through that process. It obviously was, I don't want to say derailed, but there was a slight detour with COVID. Although we did decide to continue, you know, pushing forward because we did have data on board goals and metrics moving forward. But as we did this evaluation, sort of recognizing that we're going to need to revisit some of those goals moving forward. But overall, the superintendent did quite well. And again, as Chair Constant mentioned, the evaluation is on file. We had a really robust conversation in executive session delivering it. And I just want to thank the superintendent and his entire team for their work. I've only been here for just a little less than a year, but it's impressive to see what's coming out of this district. As with any district, there are lots of places where we need to improve. And I think with any individual in a performance evaluation, there are areas of improvement as well. But I think overall, it was a very positive recommendation. Thanks to the superintendent. And maybe with that, I'll just see if any board members have any summary comments, and then we can adopt it and move on.
Okay, let's put the motion on the table, and then we'll see if there's more discussion. Thank you. The board will now consider resolution number 6136 to approve the superintendent's performance appraisal. Director Edwards moves. Do I have a second?
Second.
Second. Director Scott and DePass second the motion to adopt resolution 6136. Ms. Bradshaw, is there any public comment?
No.
Okay. Any further board discussion?
I'll just say, well, this isn't necessarily tracking the standards that we looked at in the evaluation tool. I think this was a year like none other. And I'm trying to think how we could have predicted at the beginning of the year this is where we'd end. But I want to just note the adaptability and the flexibility of the superintendent and his leadership team throughout this year. Again, I don't think any evaluation instrument could have captured what we needed to land where we are at the close of the year. So I just want to note that particular piece, which we didn't capture necessarily in our formal evaluation, but I think we're landing in a good spot at the end of the year, well positioned to move forward.
Thank you. I would just add one of the things we discussed was that in our prior two performance evaluations of Superintendent Guerrero, a big focus was on building a team. That he has reconstituted the entire senior leadership team, and so that's been a huge push for the first 2 years. And so I think, with the exception of Dr. Brown and Dr. Bird, we had this whole team comprised until those two late add all-stars. And to that point, I think we have all commented that with the unprecedented challenges of moving instantaneously to remote learning, we've been so grateful for this team that's in place and for the leadership, because to imagine having to adapt to that and having to continue to serve our students without having the type of professionals that we have on board and the type of leadership is just was really unfathomable to all of us. And that was a thread that we discussed in our discussions about your performance and visionary leadership, Superintendent. Any other comments?
Yeah, I'm again just grateful for an extraordinary leader and extraordinary team. So thank you. Thanking you for keeping our district grounded in our vision and in our equity work. Forward, forward, forward.
You're here. All right. The board will now vote.
Can I,
of course.
Hang on. Sorry. So the everything has been said. The fact that we've got a budget that not only is staying true to the commitment on equity, but is actually making investments to advance equity in this current climate is pretty amazing. But the other thing I wanted to mention, and I don't think anybody's mentioned it tonight, during this crisis, PPS has become a real leader in this state on dealing with the coronavirus crisis. And
Maybe not in technology.
Rita, we lost you there for a bit.
Sorry. I was getting a lot of feedback, so I was trying to fix the feedback. But anyway, so I don't know where I lost you. PPS has, in this coronavirus crisis in this state, and I don't think we mentioned it enough. I don't think we acknowledge it enough. And during the TSCC meeting, just prior to the board meeting, it was mentioned that as the largest district in the state, PPS should have some, some leadership role. And it is a role that I don't think PPS has actually fulfilled for most of the time that I've been paying attention to PPS. So I'm really thrilled that under Superintendent Guerrero's leadership, PPS is taking its place in this state as kind of a pioneer in changing the way public education works. We're getting our own house in order, and PPS is helping to create a kind of a consortium of some of the larger districts in the state to develop collaborative, cooperative arrangements that are going to bring in professional development opportunities, and really helping to bring bring improvement science to the state, for example. And so anyway, I wanted to give my thanks to the superintendent and his team for, really making PPS a leader in this state and it's going to benefit our kids. So thank you.
Hear, hear.
Call the question.
Go ahead.
Call the question.
Oh, I thought you said you had a question. I was giving that a sufficiently awkward pause to make sure I gave everyone an opportunity to jump in. The board will now vote on resolution 6136. All in favor, please indicate by saying yes.
Yes.
Yes. All opposed, please indicate by saying no. Any abstentions? Resolution 6136 is approved by a vote of 7-1. And Ms. Large, does Maxine vote on this? I don't think so, because it's a personnel matter. But Maxine, when we were discussing this in executive session, if you want to send him a parting email, I'm sure it would be welcome.
Okay.
All right. Thank you, everyone. The motion is approved by a vote of 7-0. Suffice to say, we feel extremely grateful for your leadership of the district, Superintendent Guerrero.
Thank you, Chair Constam, and I've said it to the board previously, and I can't say it enough. Any successes, any growth that we've experienced, it's due to the talented team that you see on the screen. So it's their tireless work. If there's any area that we've fallen a little short or not been up to par, I'll take sole responsibility for that. But it really is an acknowledgement of a lot of dedicated work. So we'll be sure to, as we always do, in my vulnerability and transparency, we'll digest the document and we'll make a learning session out of it and see how we can continue to grow. So thank you for your partnership and support.
And the document will be posted with our board materials as well and provided to the public. Okay, we're just about done. We have one last item, which is, I believe we have a committee report from the policy committee. Director Moore.
We had a meeting yesterday where we talked about several policies that are coming up for a vote relatively soon. We have a workplace harassment policy that's going to be voted on, going to be up for a second reading and a vote at our next board meeting. And then at the following meeting, we will likely be doing a second reading and a vote on another policy, the search and seizure policy. We're also starting to look at a policy that is responsive to a legislative mandate for a process to mitigate suicide risk among students. And we're just starting to work on that. So that's kind of coming down the pike. Okay, that's all.
And Director Moore, we'll just note that the workplace harassment policy was voted on tonight and approved.
So good. Yes, tonight is a board meeting. Yes, sorry, my apologies.
It's all right.
It's all right. Okay. Thank you, everyone. This meeting of the Board of Education of Portland Public Schools is now adjourned. Our next meeting is July 14th. Everybody take care. Thank you very much.
Thanks, everybody.
Good night.